What kind of man walks so closely with God that the earth forgets how to bury him? What kind of silence follows a prophet who never died? And what remains of a world when its holiest memory is taken alive into the heavens? There are names the wind still carries, names not written on tablets nor carved into stone, but remembered in the breath between stars. Among them is one that hums softly through eternity, Enoch. He was not a king, nor a warrior, nor a priest of any temple. He was a listener. He walked not by sight, but by remembrance, as if each step upon the dust awakened echoes from before the flood. He spoke to the silence as one might speak to an old friend, and in return, heaven unfolded its hidden paths before him. When the sons of Adam built cities of pride and iron, Enoch built altars of wind. He measured time not by suns and moons, but by the nearness of God's voice. And when his years had gathered like candles in the dark, the heavens did not send death to claim him. Instead, the sky opened like a forgotten door, and Enoch walked through. If your soul feels this remembrance, stay close. Do not subscribe to a channel, subscribe to memory itself. For perhaps this story waited all these ages just to find you. Now, breathe. The lamps are lit. The scroll is opening. What does the earth remember of the first footsteps that touched it? Before the songs of men, before the cry of beasts, there was a quiet, an ancient hush stretched across the valleys of the newborn world. The wind moved slowly, like a hand brushing through unformed time. Mountains were still wet with creation, and rivers shone like molten glass beneath the first sunrise. The breath of God lingered everywhere, and the soil, still trembling from his word, waited to bloom. In those early ages, the sons of Adam wandered in awe. They spoke little, for the sky still thundered softly with divine afterthoughts. But among them was one who listened more deeply than the rest. Even as a child, he would pause in the fields and tilt his head, as though the wind whispered in a language older than sound. His name was Enoch. He was not known for strength, nor for craft, nor for the building of stone altars. His greatness was of another kind, the kind that kneels instead of conquers. When others chased after gain, he chased after breath. He believed that the world was not a thing to possess, but a memory to protect. At night, while fires burned in distant camps, he would climb the low hills and sit in the silence. The stars were closer then, and he could almost feel their pulse above him. "If the heavens remember us," he would whisper, "then we must remember them." It was a prayer without form, but heaven heard it. And in time, the silence began to answer. The voice did not come as thunder or flame. It came as a quiet knowing, a warmth that wrapped around the soul and bent the heart toward light. It did not speak in words, but in presence. From that night on, Enoch's eyes no longer saw the world as others did. He began to see between things, between day and night, between dust and breath, between what was seen and what remembered being seen. Years passed. The children of Cain raised walls and forged metal that shone like captured suns. The earth grew louder, heavier, but Enoch's footsteps left no noise. He walked gently, as if afraid to wake the ground. Men began to call him strange, others called him holy, but he only smiled, for he had come to understand that holiness was not a crown, it was a weight carried quietly through every breath. He began to write, not with ink, but with the rhythm of his walk. His journey became his scripture, his silence, his prayer. Wherever he went, peace followed, though few could name it. The beasts grew calm near him, and storms delayed their coming. It was said that even shadows hesitated to fall upon his path. Still, Enoch did not claim wisdom. He feared pride more than death. He often knelt beside the rivers and pressed his palms into the mud, whispering, "Remember where you came from." And sometimes, it seemed, the river listened. One twilight, as mist gathered along the horizon, he felt a stirring deep within the wind. It was not the rustle of leaves, nor the cry of birds. It was something older, an echo of the moment when light first touched dust. And in that echo, he felt his own name being called, not from the earth, but from the spaces between stars. He lifted his face to the darkening sky, eyes wide, lips parted in wonder, and for a brief, impossible instant, the heavens opened like a living breath. No fire fell, no voice thundered, only a gentle light descended, soft as dawn upon the heart. It touched his brow and vanished. But the air remembered, and from that night forward, wherever Enoch walked, the dust beneath his feet seemed to whisper of heaven. The days of men were long in those ancient times. Their shadows stretched across generations, and their memory carried the scent of Eden. Yet with each passing century, the echo of paradise dimmed, fading beneath the noise of tools and hunger. Men forgot the hush that followed creation. They learned to measure the sky, to bind the rivers, to name what should have remained unnamed. The earth, once radiant with gratitude, grew weary beneath the weight of their dominion. But Enoch still listened. While others built, he remembered. He would stand upon the edge of the plain where morning light gathered like dust, and he would breathe in the air as though tasting the remnant of a promise. He spoke to the mountains as if they were kin, and to the stars as if they might answer. His heart had become an altar, and his silence an unending prayer. Sometimes he felt the presence walk beside him, unseen, vast and tender. When he lifted his gaze to the clouds, they seemed to pause in their drifting, as though the heavens themselves waited for him to speak. He never dared to. He feared to break the holiness of that nearness. So he merely bowed his head and whispered, "I am listening." And still the heavens waited. At times he would journey to the ancient stones, monoliths that stood long before cities, relics of the first worshippers of light. There, the wind spoke through cracks in the earth, carrying voices too old for understanding. One night, as he knelt among them, the stars aligned in a pattern unseen since the birth of Seth. A river of light poured across the sky, bright and trembling. Enoch's breath caught. His spirit stirred as if his very soul remembered another world. He saw visions then fleeting, yet eternal. The sea before it was divided, the garden before it was closed. He saw the face of an angel shrouded in flame and sorrow, and behind it, a throne concealed in radiance. He fell upon his face, trembling, and yet amid the terror he felt peace like a hand upon the heart. When morning came, the visions did not fade. The sunlight seemed thinner, as if stretched across eternity. Every sound carried new meaning, the rustle of leaves, the drip of water, the breath between words. It all spoke of something vast and waiting. He began to wander farther, into lands unknown. Some said he followed the line of the stars. Others claimed the wind led him. In truth, he followed the quiet within the same voice that whispered in the stillness before dawn. Villages welcomed him, though few understood him. He spoke of mercy when men wanted law, of stillness when they hungered for power. His words were like rain upon iron, soft, persistent, reshaping. Children followed him, fascinated by his gentleness. Elders watched with unease, whispering that perhaps he had seen too much of heaven. Yet none could deny that wherever Enoch lingered, peace seemed to take root. Crops thrived, winds softened, nightmares ceased, and in the hush after his departure, the earth itself seemed to sigh. Still, he longed for something beyond the peace of men, something wordless, immense, and pure. Each night, he gazed toward the horizon where light met darkness and whispered, "Show me what the first dawn remembered." And in the deep silence that followed, he thought he heard an answer, not in words, but in warmth. The earth beneath him pulsed faintly, like a heart beneath the skin of time, and he knew the world was alive, with remembrance. That night, he dreamed of a door made of light. It stood in the void, between two breaths. From beyond it, a voice whispered, not commanding, not distant, but loving beyond measure. "Walk." He woke with tears on his face and a peace that frightened him, for in that moment he understood his path would not end where the dust did. Morning came clothed in silver mist, its silence so complete that even the birds dared not break it. Enoch awoke beside the river and found that his dream still clung to him, like the echo of an unseen hymn. His heart was restless, yet full. He felt as though the veil between worlds had thinned and he now breathed in two realms at once. He walked slowly to the water's edge. The surface shimmered, reflecting a sky pale with dawn. As he gazed into it, he saw not his own reflection, but the trembling image of a vast light, something beyond understanding. It flickered like a memory half forgotten, and in its pulse he heard again the whisper from the dream, "Walk." And so he did. He began his pilgrimage across the lands of the first earth. He moved through valleys where the bones of giants lay beneath the soil, through forests older than speech. In every place he built no altar, for the world itself was his sanctuary. He bowed not before idols, but before the breath within all living things. People began to follow him, farmers, shepherds, wanderers. They called him the listener, and they asked what he had heard from the sky. But Enoch only smiled and said, "The heavens do not speak to those who seek to own their secrets. They speak to those who remember." And still the heavens waited. At night, when his followers slept, Enoch would stand alone upon the hills. He would trace the stars with his hand, whispering their names as though greeting old friends. Sometimes the constellations shifted, forming patterns unseen by others. Once he beheld a single star, burning brighter than the rest, descending slowly like a tear through the firmament. It fell to earth beyond the horizon, and though no sound reached him, he felt the world shudder. He understood then that the sky was not distant. It was alive, watching, longing, and he was not merely a man looking upward, but a memory of heaven looking back. In that moment, something within him changed. He felt the pulse of creation move through his veins. He heard the song of the rivers and the trembling of the stars as one voice. He saw the light that lived in the dust beneath his feet and realized the divine had never left. It was only sleeping, waiting for those who still remembered. He fell to his knees, overcome by the beauty of it. The ground seemed to breathe beneath his hands. Tears touched the soil, and for an instant it glowed faintly, as though the world itself had recognized him. And from the darkness above came a breath, gentle and vast. "You have remembered well." The voice was not of thunder nor command. It was sorrow and love entwined, a sound that carried both beginning and end. Enoch wept openly, for he knew the weight of such grace. It was the sound of a world that had not forgotten him, and of a heaven that had not ceased to care. He rose slowly, the night trembling around him, his heart lit with something eternal. The stars flared once more, then stilled, and in that holy silence, the dust beneath his feet seemed to hum with light. The days that followed were quieter than words. The air itself seemed to cradle him. Even the wind moved softly, as if unwilling to disturb the memory that walked beside him. Wherever Enoch stepped, the dust shimmered faintly, and flowers turned their faces toward his shadow. It was said that when he spoke, the trees leaned nearer, not for knowledge, but for comfort. He did not claim holiness. He spoke of no commandments and offered no new law. His teaching was gentler, that remembrance itself was worship, that every breath could be prayer. The Creator, he told those who gathered around him, does not dwell in temples made by stone. He dwells in the space between one heartbeat and the next. People came from distant valleys to see him. Some brought gifts, others questions. They wanted miracles, but he offered them stillness. "You will find heaven," he said, "when you remember what silence once sounded like." Many left confused. A few stayed not to learn, but to listen. And in their listening, they too began to change. Each evening, Enoch withdrew from the company of men and walked alone into the fields. He would watch the sunset bleeding into gold, feel the cool breath of the first stars. It was in those quiet hours that he felt closest to the presence, the same voice that once called him from the dust. He began to understand that his path was not meant to end among men. There was a calling beyond the rivers and mountains, beyond even the stars that watched him. A gentle longing rose within him, not for death, but for return, for home. One night, as the moon climbed pale and high, Enoch stood upon the hill where his journey had begun. The world lay beneath him, vast and breathing. He closed his eyes and whispered, "I have remembered." The wind stirred. The ground sighed like an old friend, and for a single heartbeat, heaven leaned close enough to listen. Then the silence deepened, a silence so profound that even eternity paused to hear it. And still, the heavens waited. Night descended like an ancient memory. The stars hung low, heavy with thought, and the horizon trembled with hidden fire. Enoch stood upon a high ridge, his face turned toward the winds of the east, and the air around him began to breathe differently. The silence that had once comforted him now stirred with unfamiliar presence. Something vast was listening back. There were voices in the wind, soft, layered, sorrowful. They spoke not in words, but in the deep vibration of remembrance, the hum that runs beneath creation. Enoch did not fear them. He had heard such tremors before, faint and far away. But this night was different. The veil between worlds had thinned to its final thread, and what was beyond it longed to be known again. He whispered into the darkness, "Who speaks?" And the wind answered not with thunder, not with sound, but with understanding. "We are those who watched when the world was young." The air turned luminous. A light passed over the hills, slow as moonlight through mist, revealing forms neither shadow nor flesh. They stood vast and bowed, wrapped in radiance dimmed by sorrow. Their eyes were like fragments of dawn, carrying both fire and grief. Enoch fell to his knees. His heart trembled, yet not from fear, rather from the unbearable compassion that poured from their gaze. They were the watchers, those who had once kept the boundaries of heaven and earth, guardians of the first order, witnesses to creation's bloom. One of them stepped forward, his light flickering like a candle remembering wind. "We were set to watch, not to descend," he said. "But the beauty of what was made drew us close, too close." Enoch bowed lower, the dust rising like incense. He felt their sorrow before he understood their fall. "Why come to me?" he whispered. "Because you listen," the watcher replied. "Heaven no longer answers us. The gates we once guarded are sealed. We have lingered in silence, yearning for one who still hears the voice of God." The earth seemed to shift beneath Enoch's knees, as though the world itself mourned for them. He raised his head slowly. "I am only dust," he said softly. "I am not worthy to bear what heaven hides." But the watcher's light flared faintly in the gloom. "Dust remembers light," the voice said. "And light, once given, never forgets its source." A wind swept through the valley, not of earth, but of spirit. The trees bent low, and the stars themselves seemed to dim in reverence. In that moment, Enoch saw what few eyes ever would: the sorrow of angels, chained not by wrath, but by love unreturned. They spoke then of ages before men, of fires that sang before the first dawn, of the oaths sworn upon the edge of eternity. Their words flowed through him like water over stone stories of loyalty, of longing, of mistakes that reshaped the heavens. Each syllable carried weight, every pause a universe. As they spoke, Enoch felt himself dissolve between worlds. His breath became part of their echo. His heartbeat matched the rhythm of their grief. He saw their memory, the moment they turned their gaze upon humankind, with wonder that became desire. And he understood. These were not demons, but broken witnesses, exiles of devotion. When the vision faded, Enoch was left trembling in the quiet. The stars returned to their places, the wind stilled, yet the world no longer felt the same. The night carried a sadness too old for time. He whispered into the void, "If even the watchers have fallen, who then shall guard the light?" And in the distance, the faintest echo answered, "Perhaps you." The sound faded into stillness, leaving only the heartbeat of the earth. And still, the heavens waited. Days turned strange after that night. The air itself seemed charged with unseen motion, and the shadows of the clouds carried a weight that Enoch could feel in his bones. He spoke little, But inside him, a tide of remembrance stirred. The voices of the watchers had not faded. They moved like distant thunder, always on the edge of hearing. When he prayed, the silence around his words seemed to listen back. When he slept, his dreams were not his own. He dreamed of vast halls of light, where pillars reached beyond sight, and beings of fire sang songs older than the moon. He saw them watching the newborn earth, their eyes filled with wonder at the first rain, the first cry of beasts, the laughter of the children of Adam. He saw how the beauty of the mortal world drew them down, gently, irresistibly, until longing became their sin. Each dawn, Enoch would awaken with tears upon his face. He felt their sorrow as though it were his own. He began to understand that the story of their fall was not rebellion, but heartbreak. And still, the heavens waited. He walked again to the ridge where the vision first came. The air there was thin, trembling. "Why show me these things?" he whispered. "Why burden dust with the grief of angels?" The wind moved a low, soft moan that seemed to circle him. "Because remembrance redeems," the echo replied. "If no one remembers, the wound remains open forever." Enoch knelt and touched the ground. The soil was warm, almost living. Beneath it, he felt something vast, pulsing the heartbeat of creation itself. He began to see that even sorrow had purpose, even exile. The watcher's lament was not to curse heaven, but to remind it of compassion. He spent long nights writing what he had seen, not upon parchment, but upon stone, symbols that flowed from his hand without thought, as though dictated by a voice within. Circles within circles, lines that crossed like paths between stars. He did not know their meaning, yet he knew they were true. The stones would remember when tongues forgot. People came to him, drawn by whispers of strange light seen above the hills. They found him seated beside the stones, his eyes distant, his voice low. When they asked what he saw, he told them gently, "There are tears in heaven, and they fall as wisdom upon the earth." Some laughed, others wept without knowing why. One night, as he carved beneath the light of a waning moon, a figure appeared beside him, tall, radiant, bearing the faint scent of thunder. Its eyes were full of storms, yet its voice was softer than rain. "You write what we cannot," it said. "Heaven forbids us speech, but through you remembrance is granted." Enoch's hands trembled. "Why me?" he whispered. "Because you have not forgotten," came the answer, "and because you still love what heaven loves." The angel, for such it was, placed its hand upon his shoulder, and the warmth of it burned like light made gentle. In that touch, Enoch felt the weight of worlds, the yearning of the unseen, the sorrow of obedience, the beauty of forgiveness, unspoken. When he looked again, the being was gone. Only the wind remained, and the faint scent of rain. Enoch raised his eyes to the sky. The stars shimmered faintly, like eyes opening one by one. He could almost hear their sigh. The world, it seemed, was holding its breath again. He whispered into the silence, "If heaven remembers us through sorrow, then perhaps sorrow itself is sacred." And the night replied, soft as dust, "Then you begin to understand." The stars pulsed once, faintly, and were still. And in the great quiet that followed, the dust beneath him seemed to stir alive, waiting for the next word. The following nights were veiled in trembling light. Enoch could no longer sleep as other men did. When he closed his eyes, he drifted into visions that felt too heavy for dreams. There was always the same sound first, a low hum, like breath within stone, the rhythm of something vast, turning in silence. Then came the voices, not of one, but of many, layered and slow, each tone carrying the ache of eternity. He saw them again, the watchers gathered on the rim of the world. They were not bound by iron, but by remorse. Their forms flickered like fire trapped in glass, and though they were radiant, there was sorrow even in their light. "We remember the first promise," one said, its voice like wind across water, "to guard the works of his hands. But we desired what we were only meant to watch," said another, voice trembling. "We looked upon the beauty of earth and called it our own." Enoch listened, his soul heavy with compassion. "And now," he asked within the vision, though his lips never moved. "Now we are the whisper between heaven's words," the voices answered. "We have become the silence that fills the distance between obedience and love." He bowed his head. "Can there be forgiveness?" A pause, long as centuries passed, before the answer came. "Forgiveness is not ours to ask, but yours to remember." The meaning struck deep. Enoch saw that these beings, though cast from grace, still longed for light. Their exile was not rebellion, but consequence, an echo of the same flaw that lived in man, the desire to hold what was meant only to be adored. And still, the heavens waited. As the vision deepened, Enoch beheld what none before him had seen, the place where light and shadow met without war. There, the watchers dwelled, between what was blessed and what was lost. Their tears fell as sparks into the void, and wherever a tear touched the dark, a star was born. He realized then that even their sorrow served creation, even their punishment became light for another world. When the vision faded, Enoch stood alone upon the mountain. The first storm of the season gathered above him, thunder without rain, a sky weeping without tears. Lightning flared, illuminating the valley below where men built towers of clay and iron. Their fires burned, their laughter echoed, and yet not one of them looked up. He raised his hands to the sky. "They do not hear you," he whispered. "Their eyes are full of their own fire." The thunder rolled softly, almost like a sigh. "Then speak for them," a voice said within him. "Write for the silence." He fell to his knees, the wind tearing through his robes. The rain began, slow and warm. It washed over him like a baptism, carrying away the dust of his doubt. In that sacred storm, he knew his purpose: not to lead, not to judge, but to remember. He would write the sorrow of heaven and the frailty of earth as one story, a bridge of words between realms that had forgotten each other. His ink would be remembrance, his parchment, time itself. The storm quieted. The world glistened with the scent of newness. In the distance, dawn rose upon the drenched earth like mercy rediscovered. Enoch stood, light trembling upon his skin. He whispered, "If even the fallen still serve the light, then nothing is beyond redemption." And from the farthest reaches of the heavens, a single star flared bright, then stilled, as if nodding in agreement. When the storm had passed, the world seemed newly born. The scent of rain clung to the earth, and mist wove like silk across the hills. Enoch walked among the quiet stones, his robes heavy with water, his eyes bright with something unspoken. Every drop that fell seemed to whisper the same word: remember. The people who followed him saw the change. He spoke less, but when he did, his voice carried a stillness that drew hearts nearer. Some said he had spoken with angels, others said madness had touched him. Enoch never denied either. "If madness is to love heaven too deeply," he would answer softly, "then let my soul never be healed." At night he wrote again, this time by the faint glow of the stars. His hands trembled, but his words did not. They came like flowing water, gentle yet unstoppable. He wrote of what he had seen, the sorrow of the watchers, the compassion hidden beneath their fall, the way heaven's silence was never anger, but mourning. He wrote that even rebellion was known by God, as a child's cry is known by a mother, painful but precious still. And still the heavens waited. As the moon drifted westward, Enoch looked upon the faces of those who slept near him, wanderers, shepherds, children of dust. He envied their peace, yet he knew it was for their peace that he was chosen to bear what others could not. His calling was not to escape the world, but to remember it perfectly, so that heaven might see it again through his eyes. He rose quietly, walking away from the camp. The sky was open above him, full of pale light and soft wind. He knelt beside the ancient stones and pressed his palms to their cold surface. "Forgive them," he whispered. "Forgive us all for forgetting." A sound moved through the darkness, not thunder, not voice, but presence. It flowed over him like warmth, surrounding, gentle, alive. "You remember for those who cannot," it said. "You write for the silence. You love for the lost. Tears came unbidden, but they did not fall in sorrow. They fell in awe. He felt himself small, and yet infinite, as though his heart were being carried through every realm that ever was. He bowed deeply until his forehead touched the earth. The soil felt alive, pulsing faintly beneath his skin. The hum of creation, that same tone he had first heard as a boy, filled him again, pure and steady. He stayed there until dawn, the first light brushing against his back like a hand. And when he finally rose, he saw that the air above the stones shimmered faintly, as if memory itself had taken form. He smiled, not because he understood, but because he finally knew understanding was not required. Only faith, only love. He turned toward the horizon, whispering, "If even heaven mourns, then perhaps sorrow is not loss but prayer." The wind stirred once more, wrapping around him like an embrace, and in that sacred stillness, Enoch began to walk again, not away, but deeper into the mystery. The sky watched, the dust remembered, and heaven, somewhere unseen, exhaled. There came a time when the valley no longer echoed with silence. The children of Adam had multiplied and filled the plains with the sound of their making. Stone struck against stone, fire danced in iron bowls. The breath of men rose like smoke toward a sky that no longer answered. They called their first city Irad, the city of names. Each street was an altar to memory, each tower a monument to fear of forgetting. They named rivers after their fathers, stars after their kings, and their children after their desires. Every name was meant to last forever, yet with every name the earth grew quieter, as though it tired of being spoken for. Enoch walked among them, unseen by most. His eyes found no comfort in the gleam of metal or the songs of labor. He saw how men sought immortality through names, carving them into clay that would one day crumble. They did not understand that remembrance cannot be forced, it must be lived. He watched them build temples whose doors never closed, temples that reached toward heaven, not in praise, but in challenge. Upon those towers, men etched their names beside the symbols of stars, hoping the sky would look down and see them. But the sky had already turned its face away. At dusk, Enoch stood at the city's gate and whispered, "They name all things, but know none. The more they name, the more they forget." The wind passed through the streets, carrying his words like ash. He turned from the noise and walked toward the quiet hills beyond the walls. The ground there still remembered what silence felt like. He knelt and pressed his palms into the soil, feeling its pulse slow, patient, alive. Behind him, the city glowed like a false dawn. Before him stretched the endless dark. Between the two, he prayed without words. And still, the heavens waited. The city of names grew swiftly, fed by pride. Its towers pierced the mist, silver in the sun, cruel in the dark. Music filled its courtyards, but it was not the music of praise, it was the echo of ambition. They sang to their own reflections and called it worship. Enoch walked its streets unseen. The stones beneath his feet seemed weary, worn smooth by countless steps that never paused to kneel. Everywhere he turned, the air was thick with the weight of voices, traders shouting, children laughing, builders swearing oaths to the gods of their own making. At the center stood a pillar taller than any tree. Upon it were engraved thousands of names, kings, artisans, dreamers, tyrants. No two stones bore the same mark. "This is our remembrance," the people told him proudly. "So long as names endure, we will not fade." But Enoch felt sorrow instead of awe. He saw how fear had disguised itself as glory. "To name a thing," he whispered, "is to take it from its silence, and some silences are holy." He left the crowd and wandered into the shadow of the temple wall. There he found a child, tracing shapes in the dust, simple circles, lines, and stars. The boy looked up and asked, "What is your name, traveler?" Enoch smiled faintly. "A name is only the echo of what once was. The truth of a man is what heaven remembers." The boy frowned, pressing his finger into the dirt. "Then heaven must have a very long memory." Enoch knelt beside him. It remembers everything, even what we wish it would forget. That night, the city glimmered under the breath of torches. Smoke curled toward the constellations, carrying prayers written in pride. But among the towers, Enoch's gaze found something else, a light moving against the pattern of stars, faint and trembling. He followed it beyond the city's edge, where the hills whispered and the wind smelled of rain. There, he found an ancient stone, half buried, carved with markings older than any language of men. He ran his fingers across its grooves and felt them pulse with life. The symbols were not names, they were memories, still breathing. He closed his eyes. The world fell away. The voice that had spoken to him since youth returned, soft as ever. They build names upon dust, but you must write light upon wind. He bowed low. What shall I write? Write what the earth cannot forget. When he opened his eyes, dawn was rising. Behind him, the city bells rang, but their song sounded hollow. Ahead of him, the horizon burned gold, the same color as the first morning of creation. And still the heavens waited. As the sun lifted itself over the edge of the world, Enoch felt the air tremble with something unseen. The horizon shimmered as though the light itself carried memory. And in that brightness, he saw the city he had left behind begin to fade beneath its own noise. Towers gleamed, yes, but their shadows grew longer, reaching toward him like pleading hands. He understood then. The city of names was not built for remembrance. It was built from fear, the fear of vanishing. Humanity had begun to mistake noise for presence, permanence for salvation. They carved their names into stone to silence the whisper that said, "You are dust, and you will return to dust." Enoch knelt in the field beyond the city walls and let the wind pass through his fingers. He whispered, "If every name must fade, then what endures?" And the wind, moving like breath over his skin, replied, "The one who remembers without speaking." He closed his eyes. The words echoed through him, deep and endless. When he opened them again, he saw the sky alive with movement forms gliding between stars, vast and sorrowful. The watchers still lingered, unseen by men, their gaze upon the world they had once loved too deeply. Their presence stirred his soul. He realized that their fall and man's pride were mirrors of the same wound, both born from forgetting their place before the light. The watchers tried to possess what was meant to be revered. Men tried to preserve what was meant to be surrendered. In both, the same ache pulsed, to be remembered without end. He rose and began to walk again, following the voice within him. It led him to a valley of broken altars, where the stones were scorched and the soil smelled faintly of iron and rain. There, in the hush of abandonment, he felt peace. He sat among the ruins and spoke to the silence. "These were their prayers," he said softly, tracing his fingers over a cracked tablet. "All words crumble, yet what they meant still lingers. The earth remembers, even when men forget." And for a moment, the wind stilled and a warmth passed through the valley. He thought he heard laughter, gentle, distant, as though heaven itself had smiled. "You are beginning to see," the unseen voice murmured. "Not all who build are lost, and not all who wander are forgotten. To name is not sin when done in reverence, but when done in fear." Enoch bowed his head. "Then what name should I bear?" "None," came the answer, soft and sure. "For the one who remembers carries all names within him." He wept quietly, not in sorrow, but in awe. The dust beneath him glowed faintly, each grain reflecting the light of unseen stars. He felt the millions of memories bound together, each a fragment of the divine thought that once spoke the world into being. He lay upon the ground, eyes open to the sky, and for a breathless instant, the heavens seemed to bend toward him. He saw cities of light beyond the veil, gates built not by hands but by mercy. He heard a choir that did not sing but breathed, and the breath itself was a song. When the vision faded, he found himself whispering the only truth his heart could hold. "The more I forget myself, the more I am remembered." The wind answered softly, wrapping him in calm. and above him one star flickered, as if heaven had written his name there not in stone, but in light. And still the heavens waited. The days passed gently after the vision, as though the world itself had exhaled. The noise of the city of names grew distant, fading into a hum beneath the horizon. Enoch no longer saw its towers. He saw only the dust that would one day reclaim them. He walked slowly, his steps guided not by path but by presence. Wherever he went, silence bloomed behind him like a second shadow. He met travelers upon the road, men of trade, women carrying baskets of fruit, children chasing dust and laughter. To them he was only a quiet wanderer, a face that passed without name. But some, without knowing why, would stop and bow their heads as he passed. They felt something in him that words could not touch. At night, he sat beside the small fires of strangers. When they asked who he was, he simply said, "I am a man who listens." And when they pressed him for more, he would smile faintly and say, "To listen is to remember." He found peace in that answer. Far above, the stars shimmered in their places, ancient patient witnesses to all things. He watched them and thought of the watchers still bound to their sorrow, thought of the city still bound to its pride. The same longing lived in both the desire to be eternal in a world that was made to pass away. He whispered to the night, "Perhaps our names are not meant to last. Perhaps we are meant to dissolve into the remembering of God." The fire flickered low, answering with a sigh. The smoke rose like a prayer, curling into the sky that had once hidden angels. When dawn came, the world was hushed and golden. The wind brushed across the plains, scattering petals from unseen flowers. Enoch stood and closed his eyes, letting the light rest upon his face. For a brief, breathless moment, he felt the pulse of creation move through him again, the same rhythm that had filled him as a child. He knew then that he was not alone. The voice of the unseen still lingered near, softer now, almost like memory. "The city will fall," it whispered, "but remembrance will endure. Do not grieve for what fades, for only what fades can be made holy again." He opened his eyes to the rising Sunday. The city lay beyond the hills, veiled in haze, its towers glinting like mirrors catching fire. For the first time, he did not feel sorrow. He felt released. He whispered into the light, "Then let them name the world as they will. I will remember its silence." And in that moment, the wind carried his words upward, as if heaven itself wanted to keep them. He turned away from the city, his figure small against the endless horizon. The dust followed quietly behind him, remembering every step, and still the heavens waited. The night that changed the air forever began with stillness. The world lay beneath a shroud of silver cloud, and the stars seemed to pulse with restless breath. The shepherds on the distant plains said the wind had gone missing. Even the rivers held their peace. It was as though creation itself waited for something to return. Enoch felt it before he saw it, the subtle trembling beneath his feet, the pull upon his heart, as if heaven were inhaling. He looked toward the eastern sky, and there, beyond the rim of darkness, a light began to rise. Not the light of dawn, nor fire, nor moon. It was a living radiance, a flame that did not burn, moving like thought through the firmament. The sky fire. It came without thunder, without noise. The light rippled across the heavens, spilling color into shadow. Gold melted into white, white into blue, blue into something that no human tongue could name. Every blade of grass bowed. The stones hummed softly, remembering their first creation. Enoch fell to his knees. His hands trembled against the earth, but not from fear. The air around him pulsed with warmth, and the scent of rain and ash filled his lungs. He knew this light. It was the same that had once touched his brow in his youth, the breath that spoke without words. He whispered, "You have returned." The light grew brighter, unfolding in spirals that reached from horizon to horizon. The mountains far away lit up as though they burned from within, yet no smoke rose, no flame consumed. The sky fire seemed to seek him, bending toward the ground like a living thread of glory. "You have remembered," the voice within the light said, calm and infinite. "Now you will see what remembrance unveils." Enoch's body trembled, yet his spirit stood firm. "Show me," he whispered, eyes closed, "what the heavens keep from men." And the light moved. It enveloped him like a breath of flame. The world disappeared. The air itself turned to music, not melody, but pure resonance, the hum of truth. He felt his feet leave the soil. The wind no longer blew. It carried him. The stars expanded, each one a doorway, each pulse of light a heartbeat of creation. He saw the earth below him, small and fragile, wrapped in ribbons of mist. He saw the great rivers gleam like veins of living silver. He saw cities rise and crumble in the same breath. Time unfolded beneath him like a tapestry being woven and unmade again. And above all, he saw the realm beyond time, vast wheels of light turning upon themselves, angels like rivers of fire, each movement a prayer, each silence a song. He saw a throne hidden in radiance, and from it a voice that was not heard, but felt. It spoke in the rhythm of breath. "Behold the pattern of all things." He wept, for he could not bear such beauty. The sky fire carried him higher still, into the place where memory becomes creation. He saw how light weaves itself into form, how shadow bows to purpose, how silence guards the heart of God. And still, the heavens waited. He stretched out his hands as though to hold the vision, but it slipped through his fingers like mist. The light flickered, then steadied. It surrounded him gently, a pulse of warmth against the chill of infinite space. "Do not seek to possess what was never yours," the voice said, "only to witness and to remember." The light began to dim, descending once more toward the sleeping earth. Enoch felt himself falling not in fear, but in surrender. The sky closed behind him, and the dust rose to meet him like an embrace. When he opened his eyes, the world was quiet again. Only a faint glow lingered upon his hands, fading like embers. He pressed them to his heart, whispering, "I saw it, and it saw me." The air was still. The wind, at last, had returned. And in the silence that followed, the dust beneath him whispered of heaven. The days that followed passed as though wrapped in a different kind of air. The world seemed alive, newly awake. The smallest sound carried weight, every shadow a secret pulse. When Enoch walked, the ground felt softer, as if still remembering the sky fire that had brushed its surface. The people who met him spoke his name with wonder, for a light clung to his eyes that frightened and comforted all at once. He did not speak of what he had seen. Words would have broken the memory's fragile rhythm. He only said, "Heaven burns, but not with anger." Then he would fall silent again, his gaze wandering to the sky, as though following something only he could hear. Each night the light returned in his dreams. It would appear first as a spark, then expand until it filled the world. Through it he saw the motion of creation, stars being born in silence, oceans trembling at the breath of God, the endless weaving of what is seen from what cannot be touched. When he awoke, the images still glimmered faintly upon his skin. He began to write them on smooth stones, spirals, lines, the memory of light turning upon itself. One evening, while he worked, a traveler came to him, a woman who had walked for days, following the glow that lingered over the hills. She bowed before him, tears streaking her face. "Prophet," she said, "what did the fire show you?" Enoch looked at her gently. "It showed me that nothing truly dies, only light changes form." She fell silent, her breath unsteady. "Then even we, the lost, may become light again." He nodded. "Even sorrow shines in the end." That night, they watched the horizon together. Far away, the last echo of the sky fire shimmered like a memory unwilling to fade. Enoch knew he would see it again, but not in the sky within himself. For the fire had not only shown him heaven, it had left its mark upon him, written in light beneath his flesh. He began to sense things unseen. When he passed by a tree, he could feel the slow music of its growth. When he stood beside the sea, he heard the prayers of the waves. The world no longer spoke in riddles. It breathed in harmony, and yet that harmony carried sorrow too, the low note of a creation still waiting for completion. One night, while the stars turned slowly above, the voice returned. It was softer now, closer, no longer distant as thunder. "Do you understand what you have seen?" Enoch bowed his head. "I saw that all things move toward you, though few know they are moving. And what of those who fall away?" He hesitated. "Even they are not lost. The fall is still a path. Every shadow leads back to its source." The wind sighed through the grass, and he felt the smile of the unseen in that sound. "Then you have learned the heart of the skyfire. Light is mercy, remembering itself." Tears blurred his vision. He whispered, "Why me? Why show dust such glory?" The voice was quiet, almost tender, because only dust humbles light enough to hold it. Enoch lay upon the earth until dawn painted the horizon in silver and gold. The warmth upon his skin felt familiar, less like sunlight, more like touch. He rose, renewed and trembling, whispering to the morning air, "Then let me be dust forever, so that light may remember me." The wind stilled. The first birds began to sing, and far above, unseen beyond the blue, something vast and living watched, waiting for the next breath of creation to begin. And still, the heavens waited. Enoch wandered far from the valleys of men. The land beneath his feet grew wild again, untamed by the hands of builders. Rivers sang without name, and mountains glowed faintly under the breath of dawn. Every step drew him deeper into the stillness of beginnings, a place where the world seemed to breathe with him, not after him. He had not sought visions, yet they followed him. The fire that once descended from the sky now moved within, silent but unceasing, an ember that refused to dim. Sometimes it would flare when he spoke the name in prayer, sometimes when he simply paused to listen. He felt it in his pulse, in the space between heartbeats, a quiet radiance that seemed older than the stars. One night, as the moon hung low and swollen, he reached the summit of a mountain wreathed in thin silver mist. There he built no altar, offered no sacrifice. He simply stood, arms open to the sky, and whispered, "If you have shown me light, then show me its purpose." At once the air shifted. The mist began to turn in circles around him, slow at first, then rising in spirals of pale fire. The mountain groaned, the stars shivered, and the skyfire returned. It descended not as a storm, but as a whispering flame, wrapping around him like breath made visible. Within it, faces appeared not of men, but of light itself, forms that shimmered with thought. The voices that spoke carried the tone of eternity. "You have seen the light of creation," they said. "Now behold its law." Before his eyes unfolded a vision vast and terrible, a river of fire winding through darkness, dividing what was pure from what would perish. Above it hung vast wheels of living flame, turning endlessly, their motion shaping the order of all things. Beneath them, shadows gathered like fog, the unformed, the forgotten, the unrepentant echoes of light's refusal. Enoch wept, for the sight was both glorious and sorrowful. "Must the light always burn what it touches?" he asked. "No," the voice replied, echoing from every direction. "It does not burn to destroy. It burns to reveal." He fell to his knees as knowledge poured into him like molten gold. He saw the balance that held the worlds together, the dance of mercy and consequence, the weaving of darkness as contrast, not curse. Every soul, every star, every shadow existed within that design. And still, the heavens waited. He heard the sound of the watcher's lament in the distance, a cry too soft for ears, too heavy for hearts. Their sorrow had become part of creation's rhythm, their tears the river that fed the fire. He realized then that even their fall was written into the pattern, that their longing was not beyond redemption, but part of it. The voice came again, deeper now, nearer than thought. "Write this, Enoch. For when the light fades from the hearts of men, they will need to remember that even judgment is born of love." He bowed, pressing his forehead to the earth. "What shall I call this?" Call it nothing. It is the memory of God. The sky fire is not a name, it is remembrance. When he lifted his gaze, the flames dimmed, folding back into the sky until only the stars remained. The wind returned, cool and still. The mountain lay in silence once more. Enoch looked down at his hands. The skin glowed faintly, traced with symbols of light, the very same circles and lines he had carved into stone. They pulsed gently, alive, like veins of fire. He smiled through tears. Then the light has chosen dust again, and with that whisper, the last breath of the sky fire vanished into him. The heavens above shimmered, silent yet listening. The stars burned steadier, brighter, as though they, too, remembered their first fire. And still the heavens waited. When morning came, it found Enoch still upon the mountain, seated among the ashes of clouds. The fire had gone, yet its warmth remained inside him like a quiet pulse. He breathed slowly, each breath carrying the taste of rain and light. Below him the world shimmered rivers, wound like silver threads, forests moved like dark seas, and beyond them the distant city flickered, small and fleeting as memory. He knew he could never see the world as he once had. The light had unmade the old seeing. Where others would see stone, he saw music. Where they saw darkness, he felt waiting. All things spoke now, even silence. The wind that passed his face whispered his name, not as a man's, but as a note within a greater song. He thought of the watchers, of their sorrow turned to stars. He thought of mankind, naming dust to ease their fear. And he thought of himself a bridge of breath between dust and glory. The fire had not chosen him for his worth, but for his listening. It had burned away the noise, until only remembrance remained. He rose slowly. The ground beneath his feet hummed softly, like a heartbeat beneath stone. He felt no command, no task, only a gentle knowing. The time of seeing was done. Now was the time to carry. He began his descent, and with each step the mountain seemed to exhale. Mist wrapped around him like robes of light, and the birds that passed overhead dipped their wings as though greeting something ancient within him. He smiled faintly. "The sky remembers," he whispered, "and so must I." By the time he reached the plain, the world had returned to its common rhythm. Yet even here, among the low grass and the quiet streams, he could feel the sky fire sleeping beneath the earth, waiting for another dawn. He touched the soil gently and murmured, "One day they will ask where the fire went. Tell them it never left." The wind lifted the edge of his cloak, swirling dust into light. The sound was almost laughter, the laughter of the divine remembering its own reflection. He closed his eyes and let it wash through him. For a moment, he felt as if the whole of creation breathed in time with his heart. He opened his eyes to the west, where the sun was sinking into a river of gold. "All light returns," he said softly, "even that which falls." And then, in the quiet that followed, the last warmth of the sky fire moved through him one final time, a promise, not an ending. The horizon darkened, stars awakened one by one, watching. The heavens, full of ancient patience, whispered their silence back to him. And still, the heavens waited. The valley that awaited Enoch was older than speech. It lay hidden between mountains of pale stone, where the wind never reached, and the air felt heavy with thought. The sky above it seemed to hold its breath, as though afraid to disturb what slept there. The earth itself had drawn its silence like a cloak. Enoch entered at dawn. His feet sank into dust soft as ash, each step echoing through ages unseen. The moment he crossed the boundary of that valley, the sound of the world fell away. No bird, no wind, no whisper. It was the silence of the first night before creation's word. He felt it at once, a presence not alive, not dead, but remembering. The air shimmered faintly, and before him stood stones unlike any he had seen. They were tall, carved in spirals and lines that hummed softly with light. Upon their surfaces glowed inscriptions that moved. When he blinked, symbols that were alive, yet perfectly still. The tablets of silence. He approached them slowly, heart bowed, breath held. The closer he came, the heavier the air became, until his body trembled under invisible weight. When he reached the first tablet, his knees gave way. He fell upon the dust and pressed his palms to the ground. It was warm, like skin. "You have come to read what cannot be spoken," a voice said, not from above, but from within the stone itself. Enoch lifted his eyes. The markings upon the surface pulsed with faint fire, forming words he did not know yet, somehow understood. Each symbol was both letter and memory, image and emotion. They were not written with tools, but with time itself. "These are the records of remembrance," the voice continued, "the story of heaven's silence. All that is known, all that was mourned, all that will be forgiven, is written here." Enoch's lips trembled. "Who wrote them?" "Light," said the stone. And the shadow answered. He bowed his head. Tears fell upon the dust and vanished instantly, drawn into the earth as though received. "Why show them to me?" he whispered. "Because the world no longer listens," came the answer. "You will listen to it." The tablets began to glow brighter. Upon their surfaces he saw not words now, but visions, entire histories unfolding in silence. He saw the first angels shaping the firmament, the descent of the Watchers, the rising of man, the breaking of Eden's gate. Each image passed through him like wind through flame, leaving behind a trace of awe and sorrow. He reached toward the symbols, but his hand halted before touching. The power in them was too great, too pure. It was not meant for possession, it was meant for remembrance. And still, the heavens waited. He knelt before the tablets for what felt like hours, though time had no meaning there. Then, from the deepest silence, the voice spoke once more. "Write what you have seen, not upon stone, but upon breath. For when the stones fade, the wind will carry what you remember." He nodded, his face wet with tears. "Then I will become your scribe," he whispered. "Not for men, but for mercy." The stones dimmed slowly, their glow returning to stillness, yet the silence did not leave him. It settled within his chest, heavy but holy, a living weight of truth. As he turned to leave, he looked back once more. The tablets seemed to pulse once, faintly, as though exhaling, and though no sound was heard, he felt it in his bones. The silence remembers you. He stepped into the light of morning, carrying that silence with him. It moved inside him like the breath of God. And still, the heavens waited. For many days, Enoch wandered with the silence still inside him. It was no longer absence, but presence, soft, steady, unbreakable. When he walked, the air bent gently around him, and the wind no longer spoke with words, but with memory. Even the sound of his steps seemed distant, like echoes from another world. He descended into valleys where the sun touched nothing, where moss grew upon stones older than sorrow. The silence guided him there, drawing him toward another tablet, half buried beneath the dust. It was cracked down the center, its light faint, as though wounded by time. He knelt before it and waited. The moment his shadow fell across its surface, the symbols awoke again, shimmering like embers. But this time, the voice that rose was weaker, fragile, like breath held too long. "We are fading," it said. "The memory of the divine grows thin among men. The world speaks too loudly to hear what endures." Enoch pressed his hand to the crack. Warmth surged through his arm, flowing into his heart. "Then let me carry your sound," he whispered. "You cannot," the voice replied. "The words are too heavy, but you can carry what they mean." He bowed his head. "Then let the meaning find me." And in that instant, the silence changed. It became a song, not of music, but of harmony so deep that it blurred the edges of being. He saw visions again, but not as before. Now they came from the heart of stillness. He saw the Watchers chained beneath mountains, weeping in eternal quiet. He saw their tears turning into rivers of light beneath the earth. He saw the prayers of mankind rising like smoke and falling back like rain never lost, only delayed. He saw that heaven's silence was not absence, but patience. It waited, always waited until the echo of every cry returned home. He wept. The tears fell upon the broken tablet, and where they touched, the crack sealed faintly with light. "Even dust can mend what is holy," the voice murmured. He looked up and saw that the air itself had begun to shimmer. The sunlight scattered through it like liquid gold, and for a heartbeat he could see the unseen, the shapes of those who had written these words. They were not men, nor fully angels, but the memory of obedience made form. They bowed toward him, their faces hidden in brilliance. "Remember," they whispered together, "when the world forgets, you must still remember." Enoch rose, trembling. "He will." The vision faded, leaving only the echo of light. He knew then that the tablets were alive, not objects, but thoughts of the divine frozen into stone. They were the pauses between God's words, the spaces where creation had stopped to breathe. He left the valley as dusk fell. The silence followed him like a second soul, watching, recording. Every tree, every river, every cloud seemed etched with meaning now. He began to realize that the world itself was a tablet, every moment a symbol, every heartbeat a line of scripture written in time. When night came, he built no fire. He sat beneath the stars and listened to the spaces between them. Somewhere above, he felt heaven listening back. And still the heavens waited. He whispered into the darkness, "If I am dust, then let me be the dust that remembers." The stars shimmered faintly, as though answering. The wind brushed his face once, tenderly, and stilled. And in that sacred quiet, Enoch smiled. The next morning, the air carried a strange weight. The world felt poised between waking and remembrance, as though every leaf and grain of dust awaited a sound older than itself. Enoch rose before the sun and began walking west, guided not by sight, but by the rhythm that now lived in his chest, the pulse of divine stillness. He came to a plain of stone polished by centuries of wind, its surface veined with faint light. In its center stood the third tablet, larger than any before, half buried in shadow, its surface cold and flawless. No words glowed upon it, no breath stirred its form, yet Enoch knew it lived. He approached slowly and placed both palms upon the stone. It was utterly silent. Even his heartbeat seemed to stop. Then, deep within, a low hum began, so faint he might have mistaken it for his own breath. The stone spoke not in language, but in understanding. "This is the tablet of things unspoken," it said. "All that heaven remembers but cannot say aloud." Enoch bowed, his forehead touching the surface. "Teach me." The stone brightened beneath his hands. Its light seeped into his skin, into his veins, until his whole body shimmered like translucent fire. In that radiance, he saw visions not of the past or future, but of meaning itself, the weight behind every word, the silence that shaped every voice. He saw how even angels paused before speaking, how God's breath became time, and how every silence since creation was not emptiness but invitation. He wept softly. "Is this what you call silence, the womb of every word?" "Yes," the voice answered gently. "Before there was light, there was listening." In that instant, the world around him vanished. He stood within a vast expanse of shadowless light, the place between thought and speech. There was no form here, no direction, only awareness. And in that awareness, he felt all things connected. The watchers beneath their chains, the rivers whispering through valleys, the prayers rising from men's lips, the stars waiting for command. He heard the voice again, no longer from the stone but from everywhere. "Write this. Silence is the heart of heaven, and remembrance the pulse of creation." He tried to speak but found no words sufficient, so he bowed instead, allowing tears to fall upon the unseen floor. Where each tear touched, a spark flared small lights that drifted upward, forming a constellation above him. The light faded, the vision dissolved. Enoch found himself once more upon the plain. The tablet was dark now, its glow spent, but upon its surface, faint traces of script remained, lines that shimmered and vanished when he blinked. He understood they were not meant to be read, they were meant to be felt. He lay upon the earth, exhausted, yet filled with peace. The silence within him deepened, no longer heavy but vast, alive. It was no longer something he carried, it carried him. And still, the heavens waited. As the sun sank behind the distant hills, the first star appeared above him. Its light was soft, but its presence felt immense, like an eye opened in compassion. Enoch whispered, "If this is silence, then let me never speak again." The wind moved through the grass like a sigh, the same rhythm that had shaped the beginning of the world. And in that breath of eternity, the dust beneath him whispered once more, "The silence remembers you." He closed his eyes. The night folded around him like scripture, closing upon its last verse. The night after his vision lingered without a moon. The stars burned low and far apart, as though heaven itself was resting. Enoch sat beside a quiet stream and laid his hands upon his knees, feeling the pulse of the earth beneath him. The silence he carried no longer felt heavy. It had become a companion. Its presence steadied him like breath before prayer. He listened. The sound of water was soft, rhythmic, the same rhythm he had felt in the Valley of the Tablets, the same pulse that had moved through fire and dream alike. He began to understand that all things, even silence, shared a single heartbeat. It was the heartbeat of remembrance. He thought of men naming cities, of angels mourning their fall, of the tablets themselves waiting under stone. All were fragments of the same desire, to be known again by the one who spoke them into being. The world was not broken, only homesick. He whispered, "Then this is the purpose of silence, not the absence of speech, but the waiting of love." The stream shimmered in the starlight, answering with ripples that gleamed like lines of scripture. A breeze rose from nowhere and passed across his face. It carried the faintest scent of fire and rain. He smiled. He knew that heaven was listening. He closed his eyes, and for a moment he was back before the tablets, feeling their warmth, their hum, their breathing stillness. But now he understood. The true tablets were not stone at all. They were hearts willing to be still long enough to remember. Every soul, every tear, every prayer left unfinished was a letter in the divine language of silence. He opened his hands to the night. The wind flowed through his fingers, carrying his unspoken prayer upward. "Let me be written upon by your quiet." Above him, the first light of dawn began to gather, pale and trembling. The silence inside him lifted with it, rising like a bird returning home. He felt the faint touch of joy, not loud, not blinding, but certain. He realized that the silence had never been meant to end. It was the space where all beginnings waited. The horizon brightened. The stream glowed gold. Enoch stood, his shadow long behind him, and whispered one final time, "The silence remembers, and so do I." And in that whisper, something vast moved unseen, as if heaven itself exhaled in peace. The dust beneath his feet shimmered once, faintly, and stilled. The world, for a heartbeat, was whole. And still, the heavens waited. There are nights when even the stars seem afraid to shine, nights when heaven watches its own reflection tremble upon the earth. This was such a night. The wind carried no voice, and yet the air itself felt burdened with confession. It was as though creation was holding its breath, remembering a wound too deep to name. Enoch walked through the valley of shadowed mountains, his robe, brushing against stone, still warm from the memory of light. The silence within him trembled. It was no longer gentle, but heavy like a heart about to break beneath the weight of revelation. He felt them before he saw them. The ground pulsed faintly, the air thickened, and a dim radiance began to rise from the darkened cliffs. Shapes emerged, tall, radiant, broken, the watchers. Their forms wavered between glory and ruin, their eyes filled with sorrow, older than the stars. They did not descend in thunder this time. They stood upon the earth as exiles returning to the place of their undoing. Their light flickered weakly, like lamps guttering in the wind, and in their presence the very stones seemed to shiver. "You have seen our silence," a voice said, "deep as the roots of the mountains. Now you will witness our fall." Enoch bowed low, the dust rising like smoke around him. "I am not worthy to behold such grief," he whispered. The nearest of them stepped forward, its face veiled by light that dimmed as it moved, its wings, torn and faintly aflame, dragged across the ground. "Grief must be witnessed," it said, "for it was born from remembrance. We loved what we were forbidden to love." And there, in that forsaken valley, they began to tell him their story. They spoke of the first days when they watched mankind with wonder, how they saw in the children of Adam a beauty that reflected heaven's own tenderness. They watched too long, too closely. Curiosity became longing, longing became fire, and fire fell. The voice of another rose from behind them, trembling like a reed in a storm. "We swore to descend together. We called our vow the oath of the dawn, for we thought it pure. But when we touched the earth, our light became a shadow." Enoch's heart ached. He felt the weight of their words like chains upon his soul. "And now," he asked softly, "what remains of you?" "Remorse," said the first. "Remorse that even heaven cannot erase." Lightning flashed silently beyond the horizon. The air cracked with unseen sorrow. One by one, the watchers lifted their faces toward the sky they could no longer reach. Their voices joined in low harmony, a hymn of repentance that shook the dust from the mountains. Enoch fell to his knees and covered his ears. But the sound was not of anger. It was the raw cry of memory. It was the morning of light, remembering what it once was. He wept until his tears turned to silence, and in that stillness, he heard them whisper again, barely audible, "Tell them we were not monsters. Tell them we only loved too deeply." The wind passed through the valley, and the fire within their eyes began to fade. The shadows lengthened, the light thinned, and as dawn touched the edges of the world, their forms dissolved into air, leaving behind only the echo of wings. Enoch rose slowly, his heart trembling with the residue of their lament. He looked to the sky, where the stars were pouring into the morning, and whispered, "Heaven remembers." And still the heavens waited. When the dawn broke fully, the valley seemed unchanged, yet Enoch knew the world had shifted. The stones that had burned with hidden light now lay cold, but beneath their stillness he could feel a faint trembling, as if the earth itself mourned. He stood long among the scattered shadows, listening to the quiet the watchers had left behind. It was not absence, it was ache. He began to walk north, following a river that ran clear and thin between cliffs. The water caught the early sun and flung it into his eyes. There, in the mirrored surface, he saw reflections not his own, faces of radiance and sorrow, half forgotten. He touched the water, and the images scattered into ripples. The voices that had spoken in the night seemed to rise from the current. "We built towers for our memory," they murmured. "We taught the children of men the shaping of stone, the forging of metal, the naming of stars. We gave them our knowledge, and they called it wisdom." Enoch's heart tightened. He saw the truth of it. Cities bright with fire, altars raised toward heaven, hands of men lifting weapons of beauty and ruin. What had begun as wonder had turned to dominion. He whispered, "You shared the fire, and the fire forgot its source." The river answered with a sigh. "We thought to bless, yet we bound them. They learned our craft, but not our remorse. What we gave as a song, they turned to thunder." He walked on. The path wound between pillars of rock that shone like glass. Upon them were faint marks, carved in curves that pulsed faintly with their own light. They were the names of the fallen, countless, unspoken, burning quietly within the stone. Enoch laid his hand upon one and felt the pulse of a heart long stilled. "You are not forgotten," he said softly. For a moment, warmth passed through his palm, and he thought he heard a whisper, "Nor are you, listener." He stepped back, trembling. Above him the sky darkened, though no cloud moved across it. From the height of the cliffs came the echo of wings, slow, deliberate, heavy. He lifted his eyes. There they were again, a remnant of the watchers, descending once more. But these were not radiant. Their light was dimmed, their wings tattered. Around their feet clung the mist of the earth they had chosen. One approached him, its face veiled in shadow. "We are the last who remain between heaven and the pit," it said. "We will not rise, and we will not fall again. Our chains are choices now, not punishment." Enoch bowed. Why remain? Because someone must remember what love costs. He felt tears sting his eyes. The being reached out, its touch cool and weightless upon his brow. "Do not pity us, Enoch. Our sorrow keeps the worlds apart. Without it, light would consume what it loves." The wind stirred, the wings folded, and the watchers lifted slowly, vanishing into air. Only the echo of their words remained. "Tell them that even angels must learn the humility of longing." He stood alone again, the river whispering at his feet, the stones glowing faintly with the warmth of their unspoken names. He pressed his palms together and prayed, not with words, but with breath. Above him the first star of evening appeared, faint yet steady as if to bear witness, and still the heavens waited. Night returned, and with it the soundless pulse of remembrance. The air over the valley grew thick with unseen wings, as if the sky itself remembered the beating that once stirred its breath. Enoch sat upon a high stone overlooking the darkened plain where the watchers had vanished. The stars above him burned strangely bright, beautiful but mournful, like eyes that refused to close. He could not sleep. The silence in him had changed again. It was no longer tranquil. It vibrated with questions too vast for thought. He felt the heaviness of heaven's patience and the sorrow of earth's ignorance pressing upon him like twin stones. He whispered into the wind, "Why did you allow them to fall?" The answer came not as a voice, but as a presence, soft, immense, and full of compassion. The stars dimmed, the horizon brightened faintly, though no sun had risen. "Because love is a choice," the stillness said, "and even angels were not made to love by command." Enoch bowed his head. Tears slipped through his fingers and darkened the stone beneath him. But their choice brought ruin. The world trembles because of it. "Yes," the silence breathed, "but through ruin, remembrance is born. The light that never falls cannot teach mercy." He lifted his face, eyes shining with wet reflection. Then all this sorrow was known? Before the first dawn, every fall was seen, every prayer heard before it was spoken. Even grief has its appointed hour. He closed his eyes, and the world around him faded. He was carried again into vision high above mountains, where rivers of fire flowed through air like molten glass. In their depths, he saw forms bound in light, the watchers imprisoned, not in chains, but in memory. They gazed upward with faces of flame, their tears burning into sparks that fell like meteors across the firmament. Each spark became a star. "These are their prayers," the voice said, "set as lamps upon the night, so that the children of dust may walk without fear." He wept again, but this time not in despair. He saw in their punishment a mercy hidden beneath fire. Their light was still given, their sorrow turned to guidance. The vision deepened. He beheld the earth from above, cities glimmering with borrowed brilliance, men shaping weapons from heavenly metals, women weaving songs that echoed the angels' grief. He saw how the knowledge the watchers had given still pulsed through mankind like stolen sunlight. And yet, amid this shadowed beauty, he saw something else, an infant born beneath a dying tree, its breath rising as steam against the cold. It was fragile, yet its heartbeat resonated with the same rhythm as the stars. "This," the voice whispered, "is why the watchers still weep." Enoch understood. The divine had placed eternity inside the frailest of vessels, humanity. The fall of angels, the silence of heaven, the patience of God, all of it wove together for this, that light might remember itself through weakness. He fell forward, pressing his face into the dust. "Then let their story be told," he prayed, "not as curse, but as warning, not as wrath, but as love remembered through sorrow." The earth trembled softly beneath him, as though in answer. The stars flared once, brighter than before, and then steadied. The wind carried his words upward, until even the silence seemed to echo them. And in that breathless hush between heartbeats, he heard the faintest sound, wings, not descending, but rising. "We remember," the watchers whispered. Their voices faded like mist before dawn. The air grew still. Enoch rose, his robes dusted with silver light, and looked toward the horizon where night met the first line of morning. He felt no triumph, only quiet understanding. He whispered, "If even their fall can shine, then no shadow is without purpose." And still the heavens waited. The dawn that followed was pale and trembling, as though the sky itself had been washed clean by sorrow. Enoch stood upon the ridge where the valley ended and the plain began, the dust glowing faintly beneath the first touch of light. He could still feel the echo of wings behind the silence, not near, but not gone. They lingered in the air like the afterimage of lightning, sorrow made luminous. The world around him seemed changed, though nothing outward had moved. The stones were still stones, the wind still wind, yet everything now felt aware, as though creation itself had witnessed the confession of its eldest sons. Even the birds that took flight did so quietly, their wings slicing the morning with reverence. Enoch closed his eyes. Within him, the great hush of heaven stirred once more. He saw again the faces of the watchers, their beauty shattered, their longing unspent. He saw their fire turned to guidance, their tears scattered as stars. He felt the ache of their remembrance, not as punishment, but as prayer. He whispered, "Even their fall teaches us to listen." The wind rose gently, carrying his words across the plain. For a moment, he thought he heard an answer, a sigh, faint but full of peace. The sound moved through him, through the trees, through the stones beneath his feet, until it became one with the rhythm of his heart. He understood then that nothing truly falls away. Every descent is only a deeper remembering. The watchers had not been cast out of God's gaze. They had fallen into it. Their light, though broken, still shone diffused through sorrow, purified by longing. He lifted his face to the sky. The stars had dimmed in the growing light, but he knew they were still there, hidden by day but steadfast as ever. "Your silence," he murmured, "is not absence. It is patience, and I will wait with you." A warmth moved through his chest, soft, unspoken, and for the first time he felt heaven's sadness, not as distance, but as love enduring itself. He bowed deeply, his forehead touching the earth. The soil smelled of rain, of beginnings, of home. He rose and began to walk once more, his shadow stretching long behind him. Above, the morning widened into gold. The sky, once heavy, now breathed again. The last of the night wind brushed his cheek like a benediction, and in that sacred quiet he heard it faint and eternal, the whisper that had followed him since the first time he looked toward heaven. "Remember us kindly, Enoch, for even the fallen were once light." He smiled, tears warming his face. "I will," he said, "and I will tell them that love, even when it burns, is still holy." The wind fell silent, the dust shimmered, the sun rose, and the heavens, full of unending mercy, waited still. The path that led Enoch beyond the mountains ended in mist, a mist so thick it seemed woven from memory itself. The air was cool, damp with the scent of salt and stone, and the sound beneath it was not wind but heartbeat, slow, vast, ancient. He had followed the silence through storm and fire, through the lament of angels and the breath of light, yet now it drew him downward into the belly of the earth, where no star had ever shone. The ground sloped gently, its stones slick with dew, until the world around him became dim and fluid. He entered the caves of the deep. No man had walked there since the days before the flood. The walls glistened like veins of glass, faintly pulsing with hidden light. Each step echoed in the hollows like a memory too old to speak. The silence here was not still, it moved, alive and breathing, folding around him as if the earth itself were listening. In the dim glow, He saw markings, not carvings of human hands, but etchings of divine fire, curved and spiraled like stars caught in stone. They glimmered faintly when his shadow touched them. He reached out, his fingers trembling. The rock was cool, but the markings were warm, almost pulsing. Then came the voice, low, patient, vast. "Welcome, listener. You have carried the silence faithfully. Now you will read what even heaven once hid." Enoch bowed his head. "What lies beneath this place?" "Memory," said the voice, "of what was before the waters rose, before the names of men, before the sorrow of angels. Here lie the first scrolls, sealed when light was still learning to speak." He felt the ground tremble faintly beneath him, as though something enormous stirred in its sleep. The mist before him parted, and a faint golden light appeared, shimmering at the edge of the darkness. He walked toward it, and the walls around him opened into a cavern, vast as a temple, its ceiling lost in shadow, its floor covered in water that reflected light like liquid glass. In the center rose a pedestal of black stone. Upon it lay 7 scrolls, bound not with cord, but with breath ribbons of pure light that shimmered and faded as though alive. The voice spoke again. "These are the scrolls of the deep, written before Eden, sealed before the first dawn. They contain the memory of creation's sorrow, the language of all beginnings, the promise of all ends." Enoch fell to his knees. Why are they hidden? Because truth too bright will blind those who see with pride. Only one who has learned the sound of silence may hear their song. He lowered his head. "Then teach me to listen." "You already have," the voice said, soft as breath. The air shimmered. The first scroll lifted from the pedestal, unrolling itself before him. No ink marked its surface, only light moving like water, forming words that breathed. He looked and saw not symbols, but visions. The first breath of the world, the fire that divided shadow from light, the sound of God's thought becoming form. And within that sound, a pause, a silence, a tear. "The deep remembers," whispered the voice, "and so must you." Enoch bowed low, tears falling freely upon the stone. The water at his knees rippled faintly, catching the glow of the scrolls and carrying it outward down the tunnels, through the caverns, toward the sleeping earth. The light spread like veins through darkness, and still the heavens waited. The first scroll closed itself in silence, folding like breath returning to the chest of the earth. The light dimmed, but did not vanish. It sank into the stone, as if the cave itself had inhaled what was read. Enoch knelt still, his hands trembling upon his knees. He felt the weight of what he had seen pressed gently upon his soul, not as a burden but as calling. The silence within him thrummed with living memory. His breath moved with the rhythm of the deep. Then the second scroll rose. It turned slowly in the air, unfurling with no hand to guide it. Its light was softer than the first, less golden, more like dawn caught between sea and cloud. As it opened, the air around him shimmered with sound, faint and sacred, like 1,000 prayers whispered through water. "This," said the voice, "is the scroll of the waters, the remembrance of mercy." Images spilled from the light. He saw the oceans in their first awakening, vast and formless, still bearing the warmth of divine breath. He saw them cradle the first reflections of heaven, trembling beneath stars newly born. Then he saw the moment of their rebellion, the rising of the tide when the watchers fell. The deep had heard their cries, had hidden their weeping in its salt. For every fallen light, a drop of sea was made. Enoch wept quietly, his tears indistinguishable from the spray that rose around him. "Then even the sea carries their sorrow," he whispered. "All waters remember," said the voice. "What falls from heaven does not perish, it is gathered." He bowed lower. "And what of mankind? Do we too fall to be gathered?" The voice softened, near as thought. "If you fall, you may rise again. You are the reflection through which mercy sees itself." The scroll brightened, flooding the cavern in silver light. Shapes formed within it, rivers flowing through deserts, rain descending upon the ashes of ruin, streams carving their patient paths toward the waiting sea. Every drop that moved carried the same echo, the same low chant of remembrance. He saw faces within the current souls of the forgotten, the nameless, the broken, each one glowing faintly as they dissolved into light. "The waters are the first grave and the first womb," said the voice. "They mourn what they cleanse, and they cleanse what they mourn." Enoch's tears fell faster now, falling into the reflection at his knees. The water rippled gently, and for an instant he saw himself not as man, but as reflection, his form made of light and breath, dissolving into the vastness that held him. He whispered, "Then to remember is to be washed." "Yes," replied the voice, "and when the flood comes, remembrance shall rise." The scroll folded, its glow softening until it vanished completely into the mist. A faint resonance lingered in the cave, like the final note of a song too holy to repeat. Enoch sat for a long time afterward, his palms resting on the earth that pulsed with warmth beneath him. He understood now that the deep was not only beneath the world, it was beneath time itself. It remembered what heaven grieved to forget. He closed his eyes. In the darkness behind them, he saw light moving as water once more. He heard the faint hum of creation's heartbeat, slow and patient. And still, the heavens waited. When he opened his eyes again, the third scroll had begun to stir. The third scroll rose without sound. It hovered before Enoch, spinning slowly, its light deep and blue, like the heart of a sapphire. Around it, the air grew dense, trembling as though listening. The cavern no longer felt like stone and water, it felt alive, as if he stood within the breathing of the world. "This," said the voice, "is the scroll of shadows, the remembrance of what was hidden, so that mercy might shine." Enoch bowed low, but his heart quivered. The air darkened as the light of the scroll bent inward, folding upon itself like a storm of stars. Within its depths, he saw movement vast, slow, inevitable. He saw the moment when the light first touched darkness, and darkness did not flee. He saw how the shadows gathered, not in rebellion, but in awe, bowing before light that they could not yet name. "There was no evil then," the voice murmured, "only contrast, only the longing of shadow to know the warmth of light." The scroll unfolded further, and Enoch saw visions unfold like smoke, the angels descending to the earth, not yet fallen but curious, the first fruits of pride born not from hatred but from wonder. He saw them bend near the daughters of men, trembling before the beauty that mirrored the radiance they had left behind. Then he saw the great silence that followed the heavens, watching, not with anger, but with mourning. He wept. "They did not mean to defy you," he whispered. "No," said the voice, slow and sorrowful. "They only forgot that love without reverence becomes possession. Even light, when held too tightly, burns." Enoch trembled, and the darkness that followed. It was not punishment, it was mercy veiled in shadow. For where the proud cannot see the light, they must learn to listen for it. The scroll brightened again, turning from blue to gold. Within its glow, Enoch saw a single flame suspended in darkness, flickering but never dying. Around it, all creation turned, every planet, every soul, every secret drawn by the gravity of that hidden fire. "This is remembrance," the voice said softly. "Even in shadow, the heart of heaven beats. What falls into the deep is never lost. It becomes the depth through which the light must pass." Enoch reached out, and the flame seemed to lean toward him, as if drawn by recognition. It touched his hand, and at once the cave filled with radiance. He gasped, overwhelmed by the purity of it, the way it burned yet did not wound. The light seeped into his skin, into his pulse, until his very breath shimmered. He fell to his knees. "I see it now," he whispered. "Even darkness worships in silence." "Yes," replied the voice. "And you, Enoch, must tell them this, that there is holiness even in shadow, for it is the silence of light learning to return." The scroll folded slowly, its flame dimming until only faint embers drifted down and vanished into the mist. The air was quiet again, but the quiet was different now, vast, forgiving, infinite. Enoch looked around the cavern and felt it pulse with new life. The stones glowed faintly, and the water mirrored not his face, but a sky filled with unfallen stars. He bowed once more, his tears falling freely. "If even the deep remembers love," he said softly, "then nothing is forgotten." The voice answered only with stillness, but he felt it smile. The silence expanded, filling every hollow space of the earth, every corner of the soul. And still, the heavens waited. The third scroll had vanished into air, but its echo lingered, weaving through the cavern like a sigh that never ended. The water at Enoch's feet glowed faintly, the light within it pulsing like a heart. He knew the vision was complete. For now, the deep had spoken enough for one soul to bear. He remained kneeling for a long time, his palms pressed against the living stone. The silence here was unlike any other. It was not emptiness, but presence. It felt as though the earth itself listened, and in its listening, it prayed. He whispered quietly, "Then even the shadows are written in mercy." The cavern exhaled a long, soft breath. A few drops of water fell from the ceiling, each one echoing into eternity. Enoch's reflection in the rippling pool wavered and returned, layered with light that was not his own. For the first time, he understood that he was no longer only a man. He was memory walking, breath carrying the voice of what the deep had hidden. He rose slowly. Around him, the walls shimmered, their inscriptions dimming like fading stars. He realized that the scrolls were not meant to be kept, they were meant to be remembered through him. What he had seen was now written within his silence. The voice returned, soft and almost tender. "The deep closes its mouth, but not its heart. What you have seen will rise again, when the waters return." He bowed his head. "Then I will carry the remembrance until that day." "You already do," said the voice, "for your silence is now the echo of the deep." The light began to withdraw, curling inward like mist at dawn. The cave darkened, but it was a holy darkness, warm and alive. He turned toward the tunnel from which he had come, his footsteps light, his breath steady. Behind him, the faint glow of the scrolls faded completely, leaving only stillness, pure, vast, eternal. As he stepped back into the open air, the world greeted him with wind and sky. The horizon was veiled in rain, the earth fragrant with new life. He looked toward the heavens, now pale with morning, and whispered, "Even the deep has remembered. How could I forget?" The breeze rose, swirling the mist into spirals before him. For an instant, he thought he saw the shape of a great eye, watching from the clouds, calm, patient, luminous. It blinked once, slowly, and was gone. He smiled, closing his eyes. "I have seen your silence," he said, "and found it full of love." He began walking again, back toward the living lands, the wind carrying faint echoes of the cavern behind him, echoes that would one day become prophecy. His steps were sure, his heart at peace. The world around him pulsed quietly, as though creation itself was breathing beside him. And still the heavens waited. The sun was low, veiled in copper haze, when Enoch reached the plain of forgotten altars. The earth here was scorched and cracked, as though heaven itself had once reached down to touch it and left its fingerprints in ash. The wind was dry, the air humming faintly, not with sound, but with memory. He felt it before he saw it, a warmth rising from beneath the stones, pulsing slowly and rhythmic, like a heart buried under centuries of dust. The air shimmered, the horizon flickered. Then came the first flicker of light, small, then swelling, twisting upward like smoke that remembered it was fire. The fire that spoke without sound had awakened. It moved across the plain in spirals, soft and deliberate, never burning, never consuming. Wherever it touched, the earth glowed, not red, but gold, as though remembering the light of its creation. Enoch fell to his knees, his robes brushing against the glowing dust. He bowed his head, whispering, "I know you." The fire rippled, brightening, responding to his voice. It gathered into a single column before him, a flame tall as a tree, yet silent as thought. Within its center, The light was not chaos but calm, its rhythm the same pulse that had once filled the deep. "Do not fear," said the voice within the flame, though no sound passed through the air. "I am not wrathful. I am the remembrance of speech before words were born." Enoch raised his eyes. His tears reflected the fire's radiance, and he felt his heart tremble, not in fear, but recognition. "You are the breath of creation," he said softly, "the word that became light." "Yes," answered the flame, "and you have carried my silence. Now you shall know my sound." The fire began to move around him, slow, deliberate, like a dance remembered from the first dawn. Sparks lifted into the sky and became stars, each one humming faintly with the same rhythm. The ground beneath him glowed brighter until it seemed that all the world was burning, yet it did not consume. He felt the presence enter him, not through flesh but through spirit. His breath became light, his heartbeat became echo. His eyes filled with visions of suns being born, of seas rising to sing, of mountains bowed in worship. "This is the song before sound," the flame said, "the memory of command before it became creation." Enoch wept openly, unable to contain the weight of it. "Then all I have seen, the watchers, the silence, the deep, they are all verses of one song." The fire shimmered brighter. "Yes, and you, Enoch, are its echo." He bowed deeply until his forehead touched the glowing soil. The fire bent toward him like a living breath, surrounding him in warmth that was not heat, but peace. "Speak," it said gently, "and the world will remember." But no words came, only tears, only the trembling of one who has seen too much and yet not enough. The flame pulsed once more, and for an instant the sky turned white. When the light faded, he found himself alone again, the plain dim, the stones cold. Yet his hands still glowed faintly, and within him the rhythm of that silent song remained. He whispered, "The fire has spoken, and I have heard without hearing." And still the heavens waited. For 3 days and nights, the plain lay quiet, and the fire hid itself within Enoch's breath. It no longer burned before him, it burned within him, a soft golden pulse beneath his ribs, like the heartbeat of something eternal sleeping beneath his skin. He spoke no words during that time. He walked among the ruins of the old altars, feeling the stones still warm with memory, their surfaces etched with lines that glowed only when the wind passed. When he placed his hand upon them, he heard echoes, not of voices, but of prayers long turned to dust. Each altar remembered its worshipper. Each stone still carried the warmth of a hand once lifted in faith. He whispered to one, "You are not forgotten. Your silence speaks still." The fire stirred within him at those words, flaring softly. A faint voice, not his own, not apart from him, murmured, "You begin to understand." Fire remembers obedience, even when tongues forget. Enoch bowed his head, trembling. "Then even the burnt offering was not about flame," he said. "No," replied the voice. "It was about the return, about yielding light back to its source. Nothing that burns in love is ever lost." He walked farther into the plain until the air shimmered again. The earth opened slightly before him, and from its fissure rose tendrils of light like incense. They coiled and drifted upward, and though no wind moved them, they danced as though to unseen rhythm. And he saw not with his eyes, but with the knowing that silence grants the shapes of those who once bore the fire before him. Prophets, poets, nameless wanderers who carried the same flame through ages of forgetting. Their faces shone softly, as if carved from starlight and ash. "We are the keepers of the unsounded flame," they said together, their voices as one breath. "We speak not to be heard, but to be remembered." Enoch knelt, overwhelmed. Then, "I am not alone. None who listens are ever alone," said the light. "Every soul that learns to hear without sound joins the chorus that guards creation's heart." The fire inside him brightened, spreading through his chest until it reached his eyes. He felt its warmth behind every blink. When he looked again, he saw the world anew. each blade of grass burning with quiet radiance, each grain of dust alive with pulse. Even the shadows glowed faintly, like ink drying on divine parchment. He fell prostrate upon the glowing soil. "Then this is your speech," he whispered, "this light that does not consume, this fire that does not harm." The voice within him answered softly, "It is not speech, it is remembrance becoming sound." And in that moment he understood that the fire was not meant to destroy or to command. It was meant to recall. It was the eternal act of God, remembering his creation and creation remembering him. The flame flickered once, and he saw within it every light that had ever been, the burning bush that would one day speak to Moses, the tongues that would rest upon the disciples, the stars that would mark every promise. They were all one fire, the same flame, whispered through ages in silence. He lifted his face and said, "Then let me be consumed in remembrance." The fire whispered in return, "You already are." It grew still inside him, resting like a breath held between heartbeats. The plain dimmed, its light settling into the dust once more. Enoch rose slowly, the air glowing faintly around him. He no longer felt apart from the fire. He was its vessel now, the keeper of heaven's quiet flame. He looked to the horizon and said softly, "The silence burns, the silence speaks, the silence is God remembering himself." And still the heavens waited. That night the heavens were strange, heavy with gold, trembling as if holding breath. The stars seemed to lean closer, their light pulsing in slow rhythm with the flame that now lived within Enoch. He could feel them speaking, not in words, but in recognition, as though every star knew the fire he carried. He sat upon the ridge overlooking the vast plain. The wind had stilled, the air shimmered faintly, alive with heatless light. And from that stillness rose the fire again, not in front of him this time, but through him, flowing outward in waves that did not burn the earth but awakened it. The stones beneath his feet began to hum, and every grain of dust glowed like a tiny sundae. He closed his eyes. The fire spoke again, soundless, vast, tender. "You have seen how light remembers, how silence guards, how shadow bends toward mercy. Now behold the breath that unites them all." The air before him rippled, and a vision opened, not above, but within. He saw the deep again, the place of the scrolls, but this time it burned with living flame. The waters shimmered as if filled with stars, and from their depths rose pillars of light, shaped like wings. The Watchers. Their faces were calm now, no longer tormented, but luminous with acceptance. Their eyes, once full of longing, now carried peace. The chains that bound them were gone. In their place was flame. "Do you see?" said the voice within him. "Even those who fell have found their song again. The fire remembers them too." Enoch's heart trembled. He reached out his hands, palms open. "Then redemption is not erasure, it is remembrance returned to light." "Yes," said the fire, "for nothing created is ever lost. Even the fall is a path homeward." He saw then how every act of rebellion, every grief, every silence was gathered and purified in flame. The fire did not punish, it refined. It turned sorrow into prayer, pride into humility, despair into light. He saw it move through all ages at once, threading history like a golden river, flowing from the first dawn to the end that would have no end. He whispered, "This is the heart of heaven." "It is," the voice replied, "and you have carried its echo. You, Enoch, are the remembrance between worlds, the bridge through which silence becomes fire and fire becomes word." Tears fell freely down his face. His body felt weightless, as though made entirely of breath. For a moment, he could no longer tell where the fire ended, and he began. He saw his life stretched out before him, like a single flame flickering against eternity, brief, yet chosen to carry the warmth of something infinite. He asked softly, "Will this fire remain after me?" "It never leaves," the voice said. "When you ascend, it will enter every heart that listens. It will become the light, that speaks in dream, the whisper that awakens the faithful, the warmth that never dies in prayer. Enoch bowed deeply. Then let me remain only long enough to pass it on. You already have. The fire dimmed then, retreating into the stillness of his chest. Around him the plain was quiet again, the air cool. Yet even in the absence of light, he felt its warmth pulsing through everything, the stones, the sky, the breath between words. He lifted his gaze to the horizon, where the night was giving way to the first silver trace of dawn. The wind stirred once more, carrying a sound so faint it was almost imagined a heartbeat echoing through creation itself. He whispered, "The fire still speaks," and for a brief moment the horizon answered not with flame, but with light. And still, the heavens waited. When dawn came, it carried a quiet warmth that did not belong to the Sunday. The world seemed to glisten from within, as though the memory of the night's fire had soaked into every grain of dust. Even the air felt alive, humming softly, like a song that did not need a voice. Enoch stood at the edge of the plain where the fire had once moved. The stones were cool again, but when he touched them, they pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat sleeping beneath the skin of the earth. He knew then that the flame had not gone. It had merely hidden itself, folded into creation, waiting to be remembered. He looked toward the horizon, where the first light of morning kissed the mountains. The sky blushed gold, and in that slow rising of light, he saw the same rhythm that had spoken through silence, the same pulse that had whispered in the deep. Fire, water, air, and dust, all breath of the same remembering. He whispered, "You never left, you only changed your name." The wind stirred gently, warm and weightless. It brushed against his face as if answering. He closed his eyes and felt the fire move again, not in flame this time, but in knowing. It filled him without burning, expanding through his chest until he felt he could hear the heartbeat of heaven itself. He saw, in the stillness behind his eyes, the great chain of light running through time, the watchers who had fallen, the tablets that still breathed beneath the earth, the deep that dreamed, the silence that waited. All of it, one story, one flame speaking without words. He bowed his head. "If I am the echo," he whispered, "then let every breath I take be a memory." The ground beneath him seemed to exhale. A soft radiance spread across the plain, not fire, but warmth, as though the world itself was grateful. He felt it wash over him, through him, beyond him. The fire that once roared now whispered inside every living thing. He raised his hands, palms open to the sky. "The fire has spoken," he said softly, "and the silence has understood." Above him, the light deepened, gentle, infinite, alive. It seemed to lean close, as if listening to its own reflection in his voice. For a single breath, all of creation held still. And then, with the faintest shimmer, it spoke once more, not in thunder, not in flame, but in peace. "You have remembered. Now the light will rest in you." The words sank into him like warmth into water. His tears fell freely, glowing as they touched the soil. The plain shimmered, then stilled. The sky brightened fully. Enoch turned away from the place of fire and began to walk again. His shadow stretched long across the golden ground, yet even his shadow shimmered faintly, carrying the memory of flame. The wind followed behind him, whispering softly the same phrase it had always spoken since the beginning. And still the heavens waited. There are silences that feel like waiting, and there are silences that feel like memory. But this silence, the one Enoch now entered, felt like a presence. The air was still. The sky above him had turned a soft silver grey, its light diffused like breath across a mirror. No bird called, no wind stirred. Even the world seemed unsure if it was meant to move. He had walked far from the plains of fire, through valleys of stone that shone like glass beneath the half-light of dawn. His feet carried the warmth of the flame, yet his heart felt the cool of the deep. He knew he was drawing close to something he could not name, a threshold beyond words, beyond time. At the horizon stood a mountain unlike any other. Its peak was lost in clouds, and at its base stood a gate carved not by hands, but by thought. The air around it shimmered faintly, as if reality itself bowed before its threshold. He approached slowly. Each step echoed in his chest, matching the rhythm that had followed him since his first vision. The silence grew thicker. He could hear his own heartbeat, then his breath, then neither. The world itself seemed to fade, leaving only awareness. At last, he stood before the gate. Its surface was smooth and colorless, but when he reached out to touch it, ripples spread across it like water disturbed by wind. His reflection appeared not as he was, but as he had been through all things: child, wanderer, prophet, flame. A voice, calm and infinite, filled the stillness. You have walked through silence, fire, and remembrance. Now you will walk through what lies between. Enoch fell to his knees. Who speaks? He whispered. All that has ever spoken, and all that has never needed to. The gate flickered faintly, its surface alive with unseen light. You stand at the boundary where gods speak to one another through silence. The voice continued. Here is where creation listens back. He trembled. Am I meant to hear what is not meant for men? No, the voice said, soft as air. You are meant to remember that even heaven must pause to listen. The mountain shuddered faintly. The light around the gate pulsed. Then, from the cloud above, came a sound, not thunder, not wind, but a vibration that moved through bone and breath alike. It was the silence between gods. Enoch pressed his forehead to the ground. The sound filled him until he could no longer tell if it came from without or within. His tears glowed faintly as they touched the dust, forming tiny rivulets of light that ran toward the gate. The surface drank them in. You have carried the memory of the fire, the voice said. Now carry the stillness of its source. And as the light dimmed, the world seemed to stop. He felt time bend around him. He saw every story he had lived, the flood, the fire, the fall of angels, the deep, and behind them all, a vast stillness, watching, waiting, remembering. When even gods fall silent, the voice whispered, the universe listens. He closed his eyes. He felt the sound fade into breath, the breath into stillness, the stillness into peace. And in that peace, he heard the faintest echo of a smile. And still the heavens waited. The gate, before Enoch, began to shimmer, not with light, but with awareness. Its surface moved like slow water, reflecting not his form, but the shapes of things unseen: stars before their birth, rivers before they flowed, thoughts before they were spoken. He felt himself dissolving into that reflection, becoming part of its still rhythm. The voice returned, softer than before. Few have reached this silence, fewer have survived it. For here the divine speaks to the divine, and creation listens. Enoch bowed his head. Then why am I allowed to stand here? Because silence chose you, said the voice. You did not seek it. You endured it. You bore its weight when others fled from it. That is what grants you hearing. He trembled. The air was thick with calm, and yet it felt immense, as though all of existence was holding its breath. Then he saw movement beyond the gate, shapes vast as mountains, made of light so pale it bordered on thought. Their voices were not sound, but vibration, waves of meaning that rippled through the fabric of the sky. It was not a conversation, it was communion. He realized he was witnessing the dialogue of the divine, the still exchange between forces that guided all creation. Every wordless motion birthed a world, every pause gave it law, every silence balanced the weight of all things. He fell to his knees. His tears felt cold upon his cheeks. How long have you spoken? He asked softly. Since before time began to measure, said the voice, now closer, as though standing beside him. And we will speak until silence itself ends. The gate pulsed. From its center spread a single ring of light that passed through Enoch and out across the valley. Wherever it touched, things awakened, a flower blooming in the dust, a bird stirring from unseen branches, the whisper of new wind. This is the breath between us, said the voice. When we rest, life awakens. Enoch felt awe tighten his chest. "Then all creation is your conversation," he said. "Yes," replied the silence, "and every prayer is its echo." He lifted his eyes. The sky had opened like a slow-blooming flame, revealing layers of gold and shadow, spiraling toward infinity. Between those layers, he saw motion, not angels this time, but thought itself weaving and unweaving. It was not chaotic. It was harmony so vast that it appeared still. He felt the weight of understanding settle in his soul. "Even gods must pause to listen," he whispered. "And in that pause," said the voice, "you exist." He wept, for it was too beautiful. The knowledge struck him like light through glass, breaking him open but leaving him whole. He understood now that creation was not a command, shouted into the void. It was a whisper shared between infinities, a single held breath where love imagined itself into being. He pressed his palms to the ground. The earth was trembling faintly, as though remembering. "Will this silence speak again?" he asked. "Always," came the answer. "It speaks each time a soul learns to listen, each time light meets shadow and calls it beloved." The gate began to fade, the mountains' glow softening into dawn. The silence withdrew like a tide returning home, leaving Enoch filled with an ache too sacred to name. He stayed kneeling long after the vision dimmed, the dust warm beneath his hands. The wind moved again, not loud, not sudden, but steady, as if creation itself had resumed its breathing. And still, the heavens waited. When the shimmer of the gate faded, the sky remained strangely open, as if the world itself had forgotten to close its eyes. The wind was gone again, and even his heartbeat seemed distant. Enoch stood in the pale light of the mountain and felt it, that same infinite quiet that was not absence but witness. He whispered, "Then this is where you listen to yourself." The voice came, not from above or around, but within. It was as intimate as breath and as vast as the horizon. "Yes, this is where all things return to remembrance. The gods speak, but not to rule. They speak to remember why they loved." The air shimmered softly. The mountain stones began to glow with a low, silver hue, and their vibration carried through his feet into his bones. He felt it rise through his body until it reached his chest, steady, ancient, alive. "This is the sound beneath all creation," said the voice, "the stillness that binds heaven to itself." He bowed his head, eyes closed. "It feels like a heartbeat." "It is," the voice replied, "the first one." He saw it then, not with sight, but with knowing, the heart of everything, immense and tender, beating once for each soul that would ever exist. With each pulse came light, and with each silence between the beats, time was born. He fell to his knees, trembling. If even the divine pauses, then silence must be sacred. "It is the holiest of all languages," said the voice. "When gods grow weary of words, they remember through silence, and that remembrance is love." Tears burned his eyes. "Then what am I to carry from this?" "Knowing that heaven listens, that even when men cry and hear no answer, their words do not vanish, they return here, to the silence between gods, where all longing is translated into light." He looked up. The air above him glowed faintly, as if the mountain itself exhaled. In the shimmer he saw glimpses, prayers rising like smoke, dissolving into stillness, the cries of children, the songs of saints, the sighs of dying men, all entering that same vast silence, purified into mercy. The voice whispered, "The gods do not forget. They simply wait until remembrance can be received." He lowered his head. "Then this silence is the cradle of forgiveness. It always has been." He wept freely now, his tears falling into the dust. Each drop glowed faintly, then vanished. The mountain responded with soft resonance, as though returning his sorrow in gratitude. He whispered, "The fire spoke of light, the deep spoke of memory, and now silence speaks of mercy. All are one." "Yes," came the answer. "For silence is not the absence of God, it is his resting face." At that, Enoch felt something break within him, not pain, but release. The last burden of longing left his chest, replaced by stillness so gentle it felt eternal. He raised his gaze toward the sky, now pale and endless. The light upon the mountain dimmed, then steadied. In its reflection he saw his own form flicker faintly, not as flesh, but as breath, luminous and weightless. "You begin to dissolve," said the voice, "for silence has claimed you." He smiled through tears. "Then let me fade into it." "You shall," it said, "but not yet. One silence still waits to be told." The mountain's glow began to fade. The horizon darkened with clouds shaped like wings. The air trembled faintly, not with thunder, but with expectation. He pressed his hands together, whispering, "Then I will carry this silence until the heavens call me home." And as he stood, the wind finally returned, a soft exhale from the unseen, brushing through his hair like a benediction. The mountain quieted, the sky steadied. The divine had spoken, and now it listened again. And still the heavens waited. The sky remained veiled in pale gold. The mountain hushed like a resting heart. Enoch lingered where the gate had been, its light now gone, but its weight still pressing upon the air. His breath came slowly, shallow and reverent. Around him, the stones shimmered faintly, as if remembering the silence that had just passed through them. He whispered, "How small a thing the voice is, and yet how vast its silence is." The wind rose again, carrying dust that glittered in the light. It wound around him like smoke, whispering fragments of unseen songs, echoes of prayers, fragments of creation, sighs of forgotten prophets. All of them meeting here, in the same still breath between what was and what would be. He knelt and touched the soil. It was warm again, alive with memory. "This mountain is not made of stone," he murmured. "It is made of waiting." The silence answered, not in words, but in pulse. The ground beneath him thrummed faintly, one long, eternal note. He felt it rise through his body like a wave and settle behind his ribs, merging with his heartbeat. For a moment, he could not tell which belonged to him and which to heaven. He realized then that the silence between gods was not far away, not locked within the clouds. It lived in the pause between every breath, in the space between one heartbeat and the next. The holy was not distant, it was hidden in stillness. He closed his eyes. Within the darkness, light stirred. It moved like gentle water, neither bright nor dim, only present. He heard the voice again, now softer than thought. "When you return to men, tell them not to fear my silence. For it is not rejection, it is reverence. It is the space where prayers are weighed and love learns its true name." His tears came slowly. "And if they cannot hear it, then let them rest," the voice said. "The silence will teach them as dreams once taught the prophets." A hush settled. Even his tears grew still. The light behind his eyelids folded inward and became calm. When he opened his eyes again, the sky had changed. The dawn had deepened into morning, and the world felt newly born. He rose to his feet, steady and quiet. The gate was gone, but its reflection lingered in the air, a faint shimmer, like the memory of something too pure to fade completely. He reached toward it one last time. "The silence between gods is not emptiness," he said softly. "It is the sound of eternity breathing." The wind answered with a single sigh, then fell quiet again. He turned from the mountain, beginning his descent. His steps were slow, almost weightless. He no longer felt that he walked upon the earth. Rather, the earth carried him as if creation itself was guiding him gently home. Behind him, the mountain stood motionless beneath the silver sky, its slopes glowing faintly, eternally listening. And as he walked, the phrase returned, no longer distant, but living inside him, part of his every breath. And still the heavens waited. The sky was quiet again, not the quiet of night, nor the hush before a storm. This was a silence that felt like understanding. It rested gently upon the earth, tender and absolute, as though creation itself had finished speaking and was now listening to its own echo. Enoch stood upon a high plain, the mountain of silence far behind him. The air shimmered faintly around his shoulders, light tracing his movements like smoke drawn toward heaven. His face had changed. There was stillness in his eyes, the kind of calm that belongs to things that have seen the end and found no fear within it. Before him stretched a valley of luminous mist. It glowed softly, neither day nor night, a place between worlds. The ground beneath his feet no longer felt solid. It was as if he walked upon breath. He took a step forward, and the earth did not sink. It rose to meet him. Each footprint glimmered faintly before fading into air. The horizon ahead swelled with brightness, and from its heart appeared a shape vast, round, and radiant. It was not a sun, but something gentler, a doorway made of light, suspended between earth and sky, its edges rippling like water remembering warmth. He stopped. For a moment, he could not breathe. The door seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat, and every pulse called to him not as command, but as homecoming. "This is the door of Ascension," said a voice that came from everywhere at once. It was neither thunder nor whisper, but a tone so complete it silenced every other sound. Enoch bowed his head, tears already on his face. "Then this is where the path ends." "No," said the voice gently. "This is where remembrance returns to light." The mist around him thickened, swirling in slow patterns like clouds stirred by thought. Through it he saw fragments of all he had lived, the deep that sang in silence, the fire that spoke without sound, the mountain that breathed between gods. Each vision appeared, bowed, and dissolved into the light before him. He felt them not as memories, but as living presences, the pieces of himself made whole again. He whispered, "Everything I have carried, you have gathered." "Yes," said the voice, "and what you have gathered, I now call back to me." The light brightened until it filled his vision. He closed his eyes, but it did not fade. It entered him, pouring gently through every part of his being. He felt no fear, only warmth, like the first dawn pressing through closed eyelids. His heart lifted within him. Every breath became lighter, every step less bound to earth. His robe fluttered though there was no wind. The valley beneath him began to glow with quiet joy, as if the stones themselves rejoiced. He raised his hands, whispering, "Then let me return. Not as you were," the voice said, "but as what you have always been." The door shone brighter now, the mist drawing back as though bowing before it. The air trembled with soft vibration, like the sound of countless wings preparing to rise. And from beyond the light came another whisper, gentle, familiar. "Walk forward, Enoch, for even heaven has missed your silence." He stepped once more into the radiance. The air rippled. His feet no longer touched the ground, and as his form began to lift, dissolving into the brightness, the world below fell into perfect stillness. Not loss, but peace. And still, the heavens waited. The air shimmered like breath caught between one heartbeat and the next. Enoch stood before the door, its light stretching endlessly upward, neither flame nor cloud, but something between a living threshold. Every moment near it felt like standing before eternity itself, close enough to feel its pulse. He reached out. His hand did not touch the surface, for there was no surface. The light simply knew him. It met him halfway, folding around his fingers like warmth remembering form. It was not fire, nor was it air. It was awareness, a living tenderness that recognized its own reflection. He trembled. "Is this you?" The voice replied, its tone softer than dawn. "It is me, and yet it is also you. For no one ascends alone. The light remembers itself through the one who remembers it." Enoch's breath caught. He looked back once more toward the earth. The plains stretched far below, veiled in mist. The mountains stood like sleeping witnesses, their crowns brushed by fading gold. He could see the places where he had walked, where the deep had spoken, where the fire had breathed, where silence had opened its heart. Each shimmered faintly, threads of light weaving through them like rivers of memory. "All this was part of you," said the voice. Each silence, each sorrow, each revelation, all were doors within the same house. Enoch's tears glowed as they fell, yet they did not strike the ground. They turned to light before reaching it, ascending in slow spirals. "Then nothing is lost," he whispered. "Nothing," said the voice. "Even the breath you release now will return to you when the worlds are made new." He closed his eyes. The air grew brighter still, and within it he saw movement figures walking in the radiance beyond the door. Some were vast as stars, others small as sparks, yet all shone with one light. They were the souls who had passed through before him: Adam, Idris, the nameless prophets, the unspoken saints. Some he knew only by memory, some only by their sorrow, and yet all turned toward him as he drew near, their faces filled with peace. "You have carried our silence well," said 1,000 gentle voices. "Enter now into remembrance." He fell to his knees. His voice was barely breathing. "But I am not worthy." The first voice, the one that had followed him since the beginning, spoke again, closer than ever, like thought turned into compassion. "Worthiness was never the question. The path itself is the proof." The light flared softly around him, rippling outward like waves upon a golden sea. He felt his form begin to fade, not vanish, but loosen. The edges of his being became radiant, his heartbeat turning to sound, his voice melting into the pulse of the door. "Will I return?" he whispered. "In ways unseen," said the voice. "Your silence will remain. Your remembrance will find them in dreams, in whispers, in the stillness between their prayers. For every generation must remember anew." The horizon behind him began to dissolve into light. The mountains turned translucent, the sky a soft breath of gold. The world seemed to bow. Even the wind grew still, its sigh fading into reverence. He stepped forward, his final step upon the soil of the world. The door brightened, folding him in brilliance. "Rise, Enoch," said the voice, "for the earth was your teaching, and the silence your crown." He took one more breath, and the air itself seemed to rise with him. The plain beneath him vanished. The light engulfed him wholly. He felt weight fall away, not as loss, but as release. The heart of heaven opened before him, vast, quiet, endless, and from that immeasurable stillness came the final whisper: "The one who walked with God has returned to the place where walking is no more." He smiled, his form dissolving completely into radiance. And still the heavens waited. The moment Enoch crossed the threshold, all boundaries vanished. There was no longer earth or sky, no distance between light and darkness. Everything was one breath, vast, patient, alive. The door did not close behind him. It simply ceased to be, as though it had never separated anything at all. He was not falling, nor rising. He was becoming. The light did not blind him. It remembered him. Each particle of radiance greeted him like an old friend, touching him with recognition. He felt the memory of creation coursing through his veins, stars forming from divine thought, oceans being born from sacred whispers, the first dawn breaking upon the breath of God. "This is the place where even silence ends," said the voice, not as sound, but as knowing. "Here begins the speech of eternity." Enoch turned slowly within the light. All around him were rivers of luminescence, flowing without direction. They intertwined and pulsed in rhythm, the very heartbeat of heaven. From their depths arose figures, countless and bright, their faces neither male nor female, but pure and ageless. They bowed as one. "He who remembered has returned," they said. "The mortal who heard without hearing." He tried to speak, but no voice came. Only breath, shimmering into shapes that spoke themselves. His words appeared as light, weaving symbols that glowed briefly before dissolving into the vastness. "You need no tongue here," said the voice. "Thought is sound, sound is form. All things are one." He lifted his gaze, and above him there was no ceiling, no sun only, endless dawn. Within it pulsed the memory of the beginning, the kun fayakun, the first command. Be, and it was. He felt its echo even now, repeating without end, remaking every moment. Creation was not something that had happened long ago, it was still happening, always, within this breathless brilliance. He whispered within himself, "Then the world has never stopped being spoken." "It has not," the voice said gently. "It is sung, and every soul is a note within that song." He saw then the tapestry infinite and alive, woven of light and shadow, joy and grief, beginning and ending. Every life was a thread, every prayer a color. He saw his own path stretched across it, from the dust of Adam to the flame of prophecy, from the silence of the deep to this boundless peace. The tapestry shimmered as he touched it. Wherever his hand passed, darkness brightened, not destroyed, but transfigured. "That is remembrance," the voice said. "Every soul that remembers, even once truly remembers, adds light to the song." He bowed, his heart trembling. "Then why me? Why choose dust to bear the memory of heaven?" The voice paused, filled with tenderness. "Because dust listens. Because what is small can hold what is infinite, if it remains still." Enoch wept, though here his tears shone like stars. Each one rose and drifted upward, joining the rivers of light until they vanished into the brightness. He understood now the fire, the deep, the silence. They had all been lessons in listening. And he realized that this place, this eternity, was not elsewhere. It had been with him from the first breath. The door was never ahead of him, it was within him. The journey had always been inward, toward the center where God waited as stillness. "You have remembered fully," the voice said, "and so remembrance will now remember you." The rivers around him flared, their light expanding until all of creation seemed to bow. The tapestry dissolved into brightness so complete that it no longer shone, it simply was. He felt himself fading into that unity, not dying, not leaving, but returning. He was the silence now, the breath, the memory, the song. He was the pause between God's words and the next creation. And for the last time, he heard the voice not above him, but within every spark of light, every whisper of love, every resting soul. "Walk no more, Enoch. The heavens have reached you." The light drew him in completely calm, eternal, whole. And still, the heavens waited. There was no more horizon, no more separation of sky or soil, of breath or body. All things were still, not frozen, but fulfilled. Enoch drifted within that stillness like a memory that had finally found its meaning. He no longer felt weight, not of flesh, not of time. Only warmth, a ceaseless, tender warmth that pulsed through him like the breath of eternity itself. He had not vanished, he had been gathered. In that gathering, he saw the worlds spinning below him, earth, ancient and trembling, its rivers glowing faintly where faith still burned, its deserts shimmering where prayers had once been spoken. He saw mankind as sparks, some dim, some bright, each carrying a fragment of the light he now swam within. He saw that even sorrow glowed faintly, for pain itself was longing for return. And then he understood. The heavens had not waited for his ascension, they had waited for his remembrance. "Now you see," came the voice, softer than silence. "Heaven does not dwell above. It lives in every soul that remembers it." Enoch wept again, but his tears were no longer water. They were light, falling like slow rain upon the earth below. Where they touched, dreams began to stir, the dreams of prophets yet unborn, of seekers who would one day feel a whisper and not know why their hearts trembled. He spoke softly, though no lips moved. "Then I am not gone from them." "No," the voice replied. "You have become the stillness they pray into. You are the pause between their breath and my reply." He felt it then, the great rhythm of existence moving through him. It was the same heartbeat that had thrummed beneath the mountain, the same pulse that had flickered within the fire, the same silence that had listened between gods. It was all one motion, one memory, one love. He turned his gaze downward once more. The world was small now, fragile yet glowing. He reached toward it, and the light of his hand scattered across the heavens, becoming stars. They hung there like watchful eyes, each one carrying a fragment of his silence. "You are the keeper now," said the voice, "the watcher who does not fall, but prays. Through you, creation will remember that it is not alone." Enoch's light flickered, then steadied. He felt no fear, no loss. The journey had not ended, it had widened. His memory stretched beyond time, echoing through every dawn that would ever rise. He whispered, "Then the story continues in their breath." "It always has," the voice answered. The brilliance around him softened. The great tapestry reappeared infinite, shimmering, alive. He saw every thread, every soul, every star, all weaving endlessly toward the same center. And at that center was silence vast, radiant, eternal, the face of the divine, forever waiting to be remembered. He folded into it gently, the last trace of his being melting into stillness. There was no end, only peace, the peace of having become what he had always sought. The heavens sighed, the stars brightened, and the earth, somewhere far below, stirred in its sleep as the first dawn of remembrance broke again. And in that dawn, a whisper moved through all creation, soft, holy, infinite, and still the heavens waited. There are stories that end, and there are stories that return home. This one was never meant to end. It was meant to rest quietly between the breath of those who remember. Enoch is no longer seen. No footsteps mark his path. No tomb holds his name. Yet he has never been gone. For when heaven called him, it was not to take him away, it was to place him everywhere. He became the pause between thunder and rain, the calm that follows revelation, the breath between heartbeats when prayer lingers too long in the chest to be spoken aloud. If you listen in stillness, not with your ears, but with your remembering, you may feel him there. In the wind that moves but makes no sound, in the hush before dawn when the world forgets itself long enough to be holy again, in the sigh of oceans when they retreat, remembering the first command, be. And in that sacred silence, the heavens still wait. They wait not for the end, but for awakening, for one soul, then another, to look upward and whisper the same truth that Enoch carried into eternity. The divine never left. It only became quiet enough to be found again. For the story of Enoch is not about ascent, nor escape, nor reward. It is about return, the return of light to its source, the return of memory to silence, the return of a wandering soul to the rhythm that spoke before words were born. The flame that spoke without sound still burns, the deep still remembers, the silence between gods still breathes through every dawn. And somewhere in the unseen, beyond measure, beyond name, the one who walked with God walks still, not above the earth, but through it, through every pulse of prayer, through every moment of stillness where the soul begins to remember its origin. For this was never Enoch's story alone. It was the story of all who listened. So if you hear nothing tonight, if your prayer ends only in silence, then know this: silence is the answer. It is heaven listening. It is God remembering himself through you. And long after your voice fades, long after stars burn out and seas fall asleep again, that silence will remain patient, tender, infinite, and still the heavens will wait. And now, let the story fade. You have walked with Enoch through the flood, through the fire, through the silence between gods. You have heard the sound that does not speak and felt the light that does not burn. The heavens have not ended, they have only grown quiet, waiting again for remembrance. So breathe, breathe softly, as the prophets once did when they listened for the voice that lived inside the wind. Rest your heart beside the silence, for the same light that lifted Enoch still watches within you, patient, eternal, alive. The story has returned to stillness. The world exhales. The night remembers. Pause. And still the heavens wait.